Chapter 971. Mother. It was a very heavy name in all kinds of senses. Now, for a mother, the corresponding name was naturally her child. It was impossible for a mother to remain calm after seeing her child. If it was a lost child, she would be even more anxious. However, the woman in the child's arms obviously didn't show this. She just looked down at the child, her lips slightly open, and she seemed to be quite surprised. "Is this child your child?" The guard obviously didn't react, but like Song Ying, she also found that the child was similar to the foreign young man. "This is not my child." The woman finally spoke and shook her head. But she also carefully looked at the child's face, and there was a strange feeling in her heart, a very strange feeling, but she turned to look at the foreign young man beside her. The young man probably found something and shook his head in confusion. The woman squatted down and reached out to hold the child's hand. "Child, what's your name?" "Paul," the child said in a clear voice. "Oh God," the child finally spoke. After that, no matter how hard the guard and Song Ying tried, they couldn't get the child to speak. If not for his mother, how could the child be so obedient? "Xiaoan." Another female guard who had been sitting at the table suddenly called at this time, and then stood up. "You are Xiaoan, right? I recognize you. I am your fan. The movie you acted in last year was so good." "Thank you." The woman seemed to want to deny, but in the end, she admitted it and took off the brown sunglasses on her face. This was a rather delicate and typical face of an Oriental beauty, and maybe because of her young age, there was not much makeup on her face. "It's really you." The female guard was so happy that she forgot where she was. She directly went to Xiaoan and grabbed her hands. "Can you take a picture with me as a souvenir?" Xiaoan looked at the foreign young man beside her helplessly. Seeing him nodding slightly, she said, "That's fine, but let's figure out the child first." "Oh yes, yes." The female guard nodded and then said, "So, this child is really yours? Then his father." The female guard subconsciously looked at the foreign young man and widened her eyes. She wanted to say something. It was obvious that she wanted to say something. "No, this child is really not mine." Xiaoan shook her head. "I don't know why he called me that, but I hope you don't take it seriously." "I understand, Miss Xiaoan." The first guard hurriedly pulled the female guard. "We won't say anything. Also, this guy is new, so he doesn't know how to be polite. I hope you don't mind." They were just security guards in the airport, not special police officers. If they were complained about by a famous person, it would be troublesome. In any case, we must get to the bottom of this. Finally, the foreign young man spoke. "We can't let Xiaoan get into trouble. It will affect her. I hope everyone can understand." As he spoke, the young man looked at Song Ying and Luoqiu. He was still very polite. "I hope the two of you can understand." Song Ying's temporary thought was, this female star was afraid of getting into a scandal and affecting her career. The foreign young man was protecting her, but his attitude was quite good. As one of the leaders of the Song dynasty group, not to mention a local star, even a member of the royal family of a country was not rare. Therefore, Song Ying was not interested in this kind of thing. "It's up to you. It has nothing to do with me anyway. I'm not interested." She shook her head directly, clearly showing her attitude. "But isn't it easy to find out? Since the child has said his name, why don't you just turn on the radio and shout? The parents of the missing child must be very anxious to find you, right? Won't the truth be revealed then?" "Yes, yes, yes. How could I forget about this? I'll do it right away." The guard nodded quickly. The radio in the airport soon sounded. Xiaoan and the foreign young man sat down. Song Ying was about to leave, but she saw Luoqiu pour a glass of warm water for Paul. Speaking of which, on such a cold day, no one thought of pouring a glass of water for the child. Song Ying suddenly blushed a little. Because Xiaoan directly denied that she was Paul's mother, she kept a distance from Paul at this time, so Paul sat on the chair alone. But the child quickly ran down from the chair and took off his backpack. He had been carrying a cartoon-shaped backpack, a picture book and a crayon. Paul directly lay on the chair and drew on the picture book with a crayon. The two guards on the side had turned on the radio. The two guards probably saw that Paul had been taken care of by enthusiasts. At this time, they were quite enthusiastic about Xiao An's work. What kind of people are they? Song Ying frowned, obviously not used to such people. She leaned against the wall, shook her head, sighed unhappily, and then looked at Luoqiu. She saw that Luoqiu didn't say anything, just stood quietly beside Paul, looking down at what Paul was drawing. Song Ying also glanced at it curiously. It was just a very simple painting. In his impression, all children of this age who were in kindergarten liked to draw such paintings. A circle and a ray represented the sun, below was a green grass, and there were a few flowers as big as a house beside it. In the middle there were two people, one big and one small, holding hands. It was probably Paul himself and his mother. Why are there only two people? Song Ying saw something and couldn't help but curiously squat beside Paul, asking softly, "Paul, right? Where's your father? Why is there only your mother?" She was really just curious. But what Song Ying didn't expect was that after this question, Paul directly put down the paintbrush, then covered his ears in horror, squatting on the ground in horror, trembling. I didn't do anything." Song Ying hurriedly stood up in a panic and spread out her hands, looking at Luoqiu. "I just asked a question, it's not necessary, right? What should I do?" "Let me do it," Luoqiu said softly, then picked up the picture book on the chair and glanced at it. Then he glanced at the crayon bag, and an orange-red one jumped out from it, then squatted beside Paul. "Aren't you going to paint the color of the sun?" Paul didn't respond, still squatting tightly with his hands covering his ears. Luoqiu said softly, "If the sun isn't painted, it will be very cold, then you and your mother on the grass will also be cold. Aren't you afraid of the cold?" The child gradually removed his hands from his ears, opened his eyes, and then nodded timidly. Luoqiu then handed the picture book and crayons to Paul. After the child took it, he began to lie on the chair again and began to paint with the crayons. Luoqiu continued to watch quietly. Only a good-tempered person can do this. Song Ying thought so. If it were her, she really wouldn't know how to deal with children. This guy, when he has children in the future, should be a very good father, right? Song Ying suddenly became a little distracted. On the other side, Joan had been watching the child, at least from the corner of her eyes. The two guards asked some gossipy questions from time to time, and Joan also responded with a few words. Generally speaking, she was not too enthusiastic, which was probably to maintain her image as a public figure. "Excuse me, I have to go to the washroom," Joan suddenly said at this time. "I need to touch up my makeup." The foreign youth next to her secretly thought that Joan had just left, after getting off the plane. However, he quickly realized that they were probably trying to avoid the two passionate guards. "I'll go with you." The foreign youth smiled at this time. Joan said, "No, if the child's parents come later, you can prove it." Thinking of this, the foreign youth quickly nodded. The two guards didn't say anything about Joan's temporary departure. Perhaps they realized that it was inappropriate for them to be so enthusiastic about Joan. The two guards were embarrassed and didn't say anything. Because of this, the guard room suddenly became quiet. At this time, a song suddenly sounded, a childish voice. Paul was humming an unknown song as if there was no one else around, while drawing his own painting. It was quite a nice song, at least that was what Song Ying thought. And when the child hummed, the voice was particularly crisp, which gave a different feeling. This song. But at this time, the foreign youth who was sitting there suddenly came over, looking surprised, or inconceivable, even a little excited. He even ignored the others and directly grabbed the child's arm that was painting. "This song, where did you hear it?" Perhaps it was because this foreign youth's appearance was too frightening that the child returned to his previous state of fear. The foreign youth regretted at this time. Is this song very important? Luocio suddenly asked at this time. The foreign youth's face suddenly turned red. Luocio ignored him and just picked up the crayon that the child threw on the ground in panic. At the same time, he picked up the child and said softly, "Go over there, it's more comfortable to sit there." He was talking about the position where the guards sat when they were working. Seeing that Luocio was comforting the child, Songying frowned and looked at the foreign youth, saying unhappily, "What's wrong with you? Why are you scaring the child?" "Sorry, I really didn't mean to." The foreign youth looked apologetic, then glanced at Paul and hesitated. "It's just the song the child hummed just now. What's wrong with the song? I think it's very nice. What's the problem?" The foreign youth looked at the crowd, afraid that if he didn't give an explanation, it would be very difficult to calm their anger, so he sighed. "To tell you the truth, I'm actually a composer. The song the child hummed just now, this song." "What's the problem with this song?" the guard asked curiously. The foreign youth gritted his teeth and said, "I'm writing a new song, but I only wrote the beginning. I can't write the rest no matter what. But the song the child hummed, the beginning is exactly the same as what I wrote. But the rest, how is it possible? I wrote less than a third." Could this be the so-called creative collision? The female guard quickly reacted. "Isn't this a common thing? For example, those TV series, most of them have almost the same script. The beginning of many songs is quite similar." "Probably." The foreign youth had to nod. He understood that as an adult, if he didn't let the child go, it was already a moral problem. But he was unwilling in his heart. No matter how creative the collision is, it is impossible to be completely the same. This is the beginning part. There is also the style. The song the child hummed, the style at the end, is obviously so familiar to me. It feels like I wrote it myself. But although this matter was settled, the foreign youth probably felt ashamed and embarrassed to stay here, so he quickly said, I'm going to wash my face. Excuse me." After the two guards saw the foreign youth leave at this time, the female guard suddenly whispered, "Why did both of them find an excuse to run away?" "Who knows?" The guard shrugged and signaled with his eyes. Turned out that his hand was under the table, and his hand was still holding a mobile phone. On the mobile phone, there were many photos of Qiaoan, the foreign youth, and the child Paul. The female guard opened her mouth, and the male guard quickly made a gesture of silence. "Don't talk." She could only nod. After all, she was just a newcomer, and the person in front of her was an old man. She really didn't dare to offend him. But it's strange. The broadcast has been broadcast for a while, right? Why hasn't anyone come to claim the child? The female guard was puzzled. There is no news from the TV station. Didn't anyone ask, "Brother, is this child really Qiaoan and the foreign youth's child?" "Well, it does look like it." The male guard stared at the photo on the mobile phone screen. "There is a child named Paul in guard room 47. He is about 7 years old. Please ask the parents of this child to contact the staff as soon as they hear the broadcast." Han Bingjiang stopped at once, looking at Qiaoan beside him. "Paul, is that your child's name? It turns out that he is in room 47. No wonder we didn't find the room just now. Turns out that the two people went there. Let's go there quickly, Miss Qiaoan." "Okay." Qiaoan seemed to be relieved, and there was a smile on her face. But when they passed by the bathroom in the aisle, Qiaoan suddenly said, "Can you wait a moment? I want to touch up my makeup. Anyway, the child has been found, so there is no hurry." Before Han Bingjiang could react, Qiaoan walked straight into the ladies' room. Han Bingjiang shook his head inwardly. Touching up her makeup at this time of the year, these stars were really too much. It was late at night and there was no one nearby. The ice monster looked around and suddenly, he was addicted to smoking, so he wanted to hide in the bathroom and smoke a cigarette. Anyway, he had secretly brought the match in and smuggled it in. But when Han Bingjiang quietly walked into the male bathroom to light the cigarette, he suddenly saw someone walking towards him from behind the mirror. Han Bingjiang put the match and cigarette into his pocket at once, and turned around, but he saw Qiaowen. Miss Qiaowen, why are you? Chapter 972. The foreign youth, who said he was going to the bathroom to touch up his makeup and wash his face, had not come back yet. The female guard poured some water for Luoqiu and Song Ying. It was a little quiet in the guardroom. Bored, Song Ying covered her mouth and yawned. Probably because she was too bored, she casually picked up the things on the table and took a few glances at them. It seemed to be the lost item list filled by the foreign youth, an emerald green ring. It seemed that among the many accessories, the loss rate of rings was the highest. Song Ying did not think much, and then glanced at the contact name written by the foreign youth. The handwriting was beautiful. Song Ying could not help but look at it again and read, Egu. Mose. Amadeus. C. M.O. Mozart? Song Ying yawned again and tried to read it coherently. Egu Mose Amadeus Mozart. I hate this kind of long name the most. Luoqiu suddenly glanced over at this time. Song Ying shrugged and put down the document. Then she glanced at the two guards who had nothing to do next to her, as if to say, I didn't mean to look at other people's things. They put it here casually. Luoqiu smiled. Song Ying glared at him, then suddenly moved her chair closer and joked, that guy just said that he's a composer and has the surname Mozart. Could he be Mozart's grandson or something? Of course, she was just joking. After all, rather than having the same surname, she could even pull out many people with the same name. What if it's true? Luoqiu suddenly asked. If it's true? Song Ying was stunned. Although she asked such a question, she did not think about what to do if it was true. People were often like this. They were curious about a question and raised a hypothesis, but never thought about what to do after the hypothesis. I don't know, Song Ying said subconsciously. Even if Mozart really appeared in front of me, I can't do anything. I'm not his fan. Why don't you go back to the hotel first? Luoqiu suddenly said at this time. I'm not too tired, it's okay to stay a little longer. Are you concerned about me? Song Ying looked at Luoqiu coldly. Is there a problem? Luoqiu smiled slightly. Song Ying was stunned, then suddenly slapped Luoqiu's face with both hands. This was not a slap, but a clamp on Luoqiu's face with both hands. Thank you very much, I'm still very energetic. Luoqiu blinked, probably because he did not understand Song Ying's action at this time and was a little surprised. Just as he was about to say something, a loud noise came from outside. It was really deafening, especially in the deserted airport terminal building in the middle of the night. Along with this loud noise was the ear-piercing sound of an alarm. Is it a bomb? Song Ying stood up suddenly and frowned at the same time. The two guards at this time called the airport terminal in a panic, intending to inquire about the situation. As for Paul, he directly squatted under the table and covered his ears, looking very scared. Luoqiu was thoughtful. Soon, the guard learned the situation from the airport terminal and told everyone. There was an unknown explosion in a men's washroom on this floor. The airport's special police have been dispatched. If possible, please come with us to a safe place. Now we have to completely block all the entrances and exit. We don't know if the same situation will happen in other places, whether there are dangerous people causing damage, please understand. Was this really something that could not be helped? Song Ying contacted Song Howren in the hotel while nodding to Luoqiu. At the same time, she walked to the door of the guard room and looked at the situation in the corridor. Paul was still squatting under the table in a panic. Luoqiu pushed the chair away and squatted in front of Paul, suddenly saying, Do you still want to stay here? If you want to go back, you can do it now. Paul slowly opened his eyes. The child's eyes were obviously very scared, and at the same time, he cried, Mom, okay. Luoqiu nodded and then stretched out his hand. Paul hesitated for a moment, but finally let go of his ears and put his palm on Luoqiu's hand. Luoqiu smiled, then pulled Paul out from under the table and carried him. At the same time, he began to pack Paul's things. A picture book and a crayon bag. "Don't worry about that, let's take shelter first," Song Ying hurriedly shouted at the door. She had not made any phone calls, obviously. She had contacted the Song family, and at this time, there were two men in black suits outside the door. They were the bodyguards who accompanied the Song family. They were carefully selected from the village of the Song family. As for how these two people suddenly appeared, there was no need to think too much. Probably after seeing Song Ying and Luochio's private action, they had been following behind to take care of them. Luochio carried Paul's school bag and walked out with the child, saying calmly, "Let's go." The two bodyguards of the Song family stood in front of Luochio and Song Ying, and at the same time, looked at the front and back with serious eyes. This made the two guards in the guard room click their tongue in wonder. This man and woman, are they some kind of young master or young lady? After pouring cold water on his face, Agamos took a deep breath, wiped his face, and then looked at himself in the mirror. But in his mind, the song that the child Paul hummed kept replaying. "I just can't get it out of my head." It's not because of a clash of creative ideas. But if that's not the case, then where did this song that's more complete than the siren song that I wrote come from? Could it be that there was someone who wrote it earlier than him, and it was exactly the same and he had plagiarized from someone else? Ridiculous. Agamos took another deep breath. His family was a bit special. His elder brother was a complete genius in the eyes of his family. Agamos only needed a few days to practice the song that he needed several months to master. In the eyes of his family, his elder brother was completely the living ancestor of his family. His family had high hopes. No matter how hard he tried, he could only stand behind his family and look at his elder brother, who was like the center of the world. Agamos thought that he would be like this for the rest of his life. However, his brother, who was as bright as a star, suddenly gave up on music and became an archaeologist. He used his almost perfect hands to dig up the soil on the ground. Those hands, which were like the masterpiece of God, should be dancing on the black and white keys. Mother, always nagging like this. Archaeology, so be it. Agamos felt that at least he had never given up music. It was just that his family had never acknowledged his talent. He was a person without talent. But Agamos never gave up. He wanted to prove himself. Even if he was not on par with his genius brother, at least he still had talent. This song was the work he used to prove himself. He had been writing it for nearly 2 years. Although the progress was slow, every note, every section, condensed his heart and soul. But now he was told that this song had existed for a long time, and Agamos' painstaking work was a complete joke? If he had not grown up in a good family environment, he would have gone crazy from the stimulation. Of course, it was not much better now. Joanne, Agamos thought of the woman he liked. She was the one who gave him the inspiration to create this song. She could always give him peace. Agamos picked up the phone at this time, just outside the bathroom. This should be the nearest bathroom after coming out of the guardhouse, but Agamos did not see Joanne on the way here. She might not have come out yet, right? But what puzzled Agamos was that the phone had been ringing for a long time, but no one picked it up. Agamos, who was more sensitive to sound, did not hear the phone ringing from the ladies' bathroom. Strange, did she go back already? She couldn't have gone to the other side, right? Agamos muttered doubtfully. Agamos. Just then, he heard Joanne's voice. It was Joanne's voice, but there seemed to be something different. Despite his doubts, Agamos turned around and saw that it was indeed Xiao and, "Why are you?" Agamos opened his mouth slightly. There was a strange feeling in his heart that he couldn't put into words, but he couldn't tell what it was exactly. "What's wrong?" Joanne looked at Agamos in confusion. "Are you not feeling well?" "Oh, it's nothing." Agamos shook his head, thinking that it was probably because of the song that he was too concerned about. He tried to calm himself down. "Maybe I'm a little tired. After all, it was such a long flight. Maybe he should ask Paul about the origin of this song." At least, if there was really someone who wrote a song with the same idea as him, he could get to know them. Maybe you're really too tired. Joanne reached out and grabbed Agamot's hand. She blinked and asked, "Are you really okay?" Agamos smiled slightly to comfort her. At the same time, he looked around nervously. "Didn't you say that we can't be too intimate in the Gonggong place?" "No one. Fool." Joanne rolled her eyes at Agamos coquettishly. "I didn't even bring my assistant this time. If I'm not afraid, what are you afraid of?" "I'm too nervous." Agamos smiled bitterly. There were many twists and turns in the process of him and Xiao and getting to know each other and then falling in love with each other. Up until now, their relationship was still pure and innocent. Because Joanne was indeed a devout believer, she would resist certain behaviors before marriage. "Why don't we leave now?" Joanne suddenly said. "After all, there are too many people here. If we stay for too long, there will be problems sooner or later. I don't know if there are paparazzi lying in ambush nearby." "Oh, that's really bad," Agamos agreed. It was a common thing for celebrities to be secretly photographed and followed. "But what about the kid in the guardhouse?" Agamos asked worriedly. "If we don't clarify, God knows if the two guards will spread the news. And there are a bunch of young men and women. We don't know them. After all, your identity has been exposed." "Are you stupid? The kid has been handed over to the guards. If his parents come and claim him, everything will be cleared up," Joanne said impatiently. "That's true." Agamos nodded and suddenly said, "But what about the ring?" "I've found the ring." Joanne raised her hand. On the middle finger of her right hand there was an aquamarine ring. "Seems like it's fated to be with me. I picked it up on the way back." "It's good that you found it." Agamos nodded, but he was not as happy as he thought he would be, because he had no reason to stay. Then he would not be able to find the truth of the song. "You still don't seem happy?" Joanne lowered her head and looked up. "Isn't this ring an important gift from your brother?" "No, you think too much." Agamos smiled. "Then let's go." Bang! There was a sudden loud noise, followed by a shrill alarm. Joanne looked back in horror, but there was no one in the corridor. Joanne took a few steps back and grabbed Agamos' hand. "Let's go." Joanne quickly said, "Didn't we trigger the alarm? Something might happen. It's not safe. Shouldn't we go first?" "You're right." Agamos nodded. The two quickly walked to the arrival hall. On the way, they gradually saw passengers coming out from other corridors in a panic. There was an announcement in the corridor calling for passengers to evacuate. Joanne and Agamos soon joined the crowd and came to the arrival hall, where the check-in luggage was picked up. Pain. Han Bingjiang struggled to get up and shook his head at the same time. He only remembered that he was knocked unconscious, and the person who knocked him out was the female star, Joanne. Han Bingjiang subconsciously wanted to rub the place where he was knocked out, but at this time, he suddenly found that he was holding something in his hand. He looked down and saw that it was a silver fork. A fork used to eat Western food. The fork was stained with red blood. Han Bingjiang was so scared that he threw the fork on the ground. But this was not what frightened Han Bingjiang the most. What frightened him the most was that in the men's washroom, right next to the position where he got up, there was a woman's corpse, leaning against the wall. She was covered in blood. She had probably died from excessive blood loss. The skin on her face was directly peeled off, but her eyes were not closed. The eyelid eyes were staring at Han Bingjiang, as if she was not dead at all. Chapter 973. Han Bingjiang was not a person who had not seen the world. But the scene in front of him was so horrible that his thoughts seemed to be frozen for a moment. His nerves seemed to have become sensitive at this moment, and his hair stood on end. There was even a chill coming up from the soles of his feet. He only remembered that he was knocked unconscious by Qiaoan. But when he woke up, why was there a female corpse next to him? Furthermore, his face had been skinned. What kind of hatred was this? What kind of cruel method was this? In an instant, Han Bingjiang realized that such a setup was a murder. Han Bingjiang was sure that he did not sleepwalk or suffer from schizophrenia, so it was impossible for him to kill someone when he lost his consciousness. Who framed him? Qiaoan? However, there was no enmity between her and Qiaoan. Even if there was, it would have happened in the future. Furthermore, it would have happened after she exposed that Qiaoan was hiding the fact that she already had a boyfriend. But he had not collected any juicy news today. Oh no, he had already learned from Qiaoan that she had a child out of wedlock, and that the child was old enough to eat soy sauce. This was indeed a piece of juicy news, but he had not reported it yet. So, what was the reason for Qiaoan to frame him? Han Bingjiang could not figure it out, but he understood one thing. If he continued to stay in this place, he would not be able to clear his name if he was discovered. This was a washroom. Even in a highly supervised place like the airport, it was impossible to install surveillance cameras in the washroom, so no one knew what had happened here. There were probably a lot of his fingerprints left here. God knows what kind of arrangements the murderer made after he fainted. The murder weapon. Han Bingjiang suddenly shivered and quickly picked up the knife he threw on the ground. Then, he hurriedly walked to the sink and turned on the tap. He used the water to wash the knife that was used as a murder weapon. I'm afraid it's not just the murder weapon. My fingerprints and footprints are all over the bathroom, and my clothes. His clothes were also stained with blood. Han Bingjiang did not care about other possible fingerprints. He quickly took off his blood-stained clothes, and then wrapped the knife. He had to leave this place as soon as possible. Oh right, he had to avoid the surveillance cameras outside the corridor. Damn it, I don't know if I was caught by the surveillance cameras on the way here. Han Bingjiang felt that he was quite calm. After years of paparazzi experience, he had encountered a lot of special situations, so he had the ability to remain calm in the face of trouble. He could only force himself to calm down. Han Bingjiang secretly told himself that it would be fine, and then hurried out of the washroom. Maybe it was time to call the police. The moment he walked out of the washroom, Han Bingjiang suddenly struggled in his heart. If he cooperated with the police investigation and found any suspicious points, he should be able to prove that he was framed. Thinking of this, Han Bingjiang slapped his forehead. He felt that it was a stupid decision to deal with the fingerprints on the murder weapon. But in the next second, Han Bingjiang felt dizzy. The moment he walked out of the bathroom, several airport SWAT officers appeared in front of him. After these airport SWAT officers saw Han Bingjiang, they were all stunned. But after all, they were well-trained professionals. When they saw Han Bingjiang walk out of the men's washroom with a pale face, holding a bundle of clothes in his hand and looking flustered, they immediately pulled out their guns and pointed at Han Bingjiang. Don't move. Raise your hands. Under the shouts of several SWAT officers, Han Bingjiang's hand suddenly trembled, and the blood-stained clothes fell to the ground. Not only was the knife used as a murder weapon exposed, but the bloodstains on the clothes were also exposed at this moment. It's over. Han Bingjiang's lips trembled instantly. At this time, one of the SWAT officers spoke into the walkie-talkie on his shoulder. Report, we are the third team. We rushed to the scene of the suspected explosion and found a suspicious man. It turned out that they had just arrived and did not have time to enter the washroom to investigate. Explosion? What explosion? Han Bingjiang was stunned, and subconsciously looked at the women's washroom opposite the men's washroom, only to see that there was a cloud of smoke inside. Why, he instinctively walked towards the women's washroom, but just as he took a step, his body was instantly pressed to the ground by two airport SWAT officers. Han Bingjiang quickly struggled a few times, but it was no use. Captain, we found a woman's body inside. When Han Bingjiang, who was still struggling, heard this, he lost all his strength and almost fainted. It's not me. It's not me. I'm the one who was framed. I'm the one who was framed. I was wronged. Han Bingjiang shouted at the moment. At this time, the person who seemed to be the captain directly said, "Take this suspect away for investigation. In addition, seal the scene, verify the identity of the deceased, and inform the bomb disposal team to check all the places in this building to see if there are any other dangerous explosives." Han Bingjiang's legs were completely weak. He was dragged away by the SWAT officers on both sides. "It's not me. It's not me. It's Qiaowen. It's Qiaowen. It's her. It's her. I was wronged." Following the crowd, Luoqiu and Song Ying quickly arrived in front of the hotel in the terminal building, and met up with the Song family. Song Tianyu was naturally very happy to see that the two grandchildren were safe and sound. At this time, the passengers who were originally resting in the hotel also walked out of their rooms, and under the guidance of the airport staff, they went to a safe place. It was impossible to gather everyone in one place. Since there was an explosion, they should have let people go to an open place. Several boarding gates in the boarding building were directly opened, and the passengers who had passed the security check in the middle of the night were transferred to the outside area of the airport. "Can't you know what happened, Achi?" Suddenly, Song Tianyu looked at the reception after returning to the country. "Mr. Achi. I'm very sorry, Grandpa." Achi looked apologetic at this time. "I actually frightened you. Don't worry, I will understand the situation as soon as possible." Saying this, Mr. Achi ran aside and began to make a phone call. At this time, Song Haoren said at this time, "I'm afraid this is going to scare them half to death. They actually caused a bomb attack in their own territory." At this time, Song Ying, who had already gathered, rolled her eyes at Song Haoren at this time. "It's good that they arranged a channel for you to come back. Don't say so much. I don't know if we can find out anything useful." Song Haoren smiled and said, "You still don't know, right? The airline that I took this time from Hong Kong is controlled by the Zhang family. I don't believe that Achi can't find out anything." Hearing this, Luoqiu couldn't help but look at Song Haoren in surprise. Hearing the Zhang family mentioned along the way, Luoqiu had long guessed that this Zhang family might be the Zhang family of his former female classmate, Zhang Qingrui. Although Luoqiu knew that the only female classmate in his class at that time was very rich, and later proved that Zhang Qingrui's family was a well-deserved hidden giant in the local area, but he didn't expect that the Zhang family had a controlling stake in a civil aviation company. No wonder the flight from South America to China this time was smooth and there were no accidents. "By the way, who is this child?" Song Haoren looked at the child beside Luoqiu curiously at this time. Song Ying quickly told him about Paul. When Song Haoren heard this, he felt that it was just a lost child, so he didn't pay too much attention to it. He smiled and walked forward. However, as Song Haoren walked, his footsteps suddenly slowed down. He squatted down and began to tie the laces of his leather shoes. After tying the laces, Song Haoren quickly stood up and walked back to the side of his people. But he whispered to the two bodyguards, "Someone is following us." When the two bodyguards heard this, they nodded slightly. When the Song family turned the corner of the corridor, they quickly hid at the same time. The boarding gate was right in front of them. The passengers were queuing up, waiting to walk out of the airport runway outside. Everyone saw that they probably couldn't cut the line or something like that. It was really not good to make a disturbance in this situation. The Song family came back in a low-key way this time. They didn't want to be too conspicuous and expose themselves in front of the state apparatus. Seven had already heard the news at this time. He quickly caught up and whispered in front of the Song family, "Please don't worry, this time it's not an attack against you. According to what I know, the special police at the airport caught a criminal suspect and are currently interrogating him. In addition, a female body with her face peeled off was found at the scene." Peeled off. Everyone was surprised by this cruel method. What about the explosion? Song Haoren was more concerned about the bomb. Seven quickly said at this time, "It's not a powerful bomb. The bomb disposal team just found some remnants of wine bottles, burned cotton threads, cigarette boxes, and matchboxes at the source of the explosion. It should be something like a temporary homemade incendiary bomb or something like that. A female corpse and a homemade incendiary bomb? Song Howren was stunned. This doesn't look like a murder? It shouldn't be aimed at you. Seven nodded at this time. Let the police deal with the details of what happened. I think if there's nothing else, the alert should be lifted soon. Everyone, please don't worry. Thank you for your hard work, Master Song said at this time. You're welcome. Seven quickly replied. At this time, the two bodyguards came back with a woman. The woman was still struggling. Master, this should be the person you said was following us. One of the bodyguards said. We wanted to escape immediately after we found out. There should be a problem. Everyone looked at her. Qiaoan? Song Ying recognized the woman who was caught by the bodyguards at first glance. It was clearly the female star Qiaoan that she and Luoqiu met in the guardhouse. But what made Song Ying puzzled was that Qiaoan was not wearing the sweater at the beginning. Instead, she was wearing a long black trench coat. When did she change it? Song Ying secretly felt strange, and then inadvertently saw a green ring on Qiao An's right finger. Song Ying's mind flashed through the list of lost items she saw when she was bored in the guardhouse. She couldn't help but feel strange. Sakura, do you know her? Song Howren was greatly surprised. Song Ying's thoughts were interrupted, and she subconsciously nodded. This is the female star I met in the guardhouse. Song Howren whistled, looking up and down at the woman in front of him, but unexpectedly, Song Ying suddenly stepped on his foot. Don't stare at her, she has a boyfriend. Song Ying pulled Song Howren's ear. Song Howren shrugged innocently, and then waved his hand to let Qiaoan go, but asked directly, Then, miss, why are you following us sneakily? Paul. But Qiaoan completely ignored Song Howren's question, and directly rushed to Luoqiu's side in front of Paul. Under everyone's puzzled gaze, Qiaoan hugged Paul tightly with a distressed face. Paul, don't be afraid, Mom is here, Mom is here. Mom. Damn, what's going on? Song Ying looked surprised. Didn't this woman deny it in the guardhouse? You are Paul's real mother. When Qiaoan in the black trench coat held Paul, she suddenly heard such a question. She subconsciously glanced over and discovered that it was a youth with a calm expression. However, this youth's gaze subconsciously made her feel as if she was afraid. She avoided the young man's eyes. Luoqiu's eyes. Paul, he is my child, no matter. I'm sorry. She didn't finish her words, but directly lowered her head, holding Paul, and rushed to the crowd. Go back. Song Ying wanted to stop her, but when she remembered that Paul had called her mother once in the guardhouse, she suddenly felt that she was in no position to stop a mother from leaving with her child. Although this mother didn't admit that Paul was her child in front of others for the sake of her reputation, it was really shameful. What kind of people are they, this entertainment circle? Song Ying shook her head. Is it worth it? But Song Howren suddenly said, Xiaoying, did you get the wrong person? How could it be? Song Ying glared at Song Howren. Then, if you didn't get the wrong person, who is this woman? Song Howren pointed to the front. Up ahead, Qiaoan, wearing a sweater and jeans, was hurriedly walking out of the passageway with a foreign young man. They had probably followed the evacuees all the way here. This. Song Ying opened her mouth slightly and stared at Qiaoan, who was with Agumos. Then, she subconsciously glanced at the spot where Qiaoan, who had just carried Paul and rushed into the crowd, had disappeared. Chapter 974. There was a special interrogation room in the airport. At this time, Han Bingjiang was taken to the interrogation room here. Undoubtedly, as a suspect, Han Bingjiang's hands had been handcuffed. Two special police officers stationed at the airport were conducting a temporary interrogation on Han Bingjiang. Everything was recorded by the camera to avoid illegal interrogation method. At this time, Han Bingjiang grabbed his hair with both hands. After only half an hour, his face turned a little green. I have said many times, it's really not me, I was framed. Then why did you wrap the weapon with your clothes and leave? The interrogator obviously didn't believe Han Bingjiang. In response to such a question, Han Bingjiang really wanted to slap himself. Why did he do these things? Was he being too smart for his own good? No, it was just an instinctive means of self-protection. He just didn't expect that he would meet these special police officers at the moment of leaving. The time was like a written script. There was no time for Han Bingjiang to react. I will keep silent. Han Bingjiang suddenly said, I should be able to hire a lawyer. The two interrogators looked at each other, and one of them suddenly walked out. Not long after, the interrogator who went out came back with a bag of things. He took out the things from the bag. It was a burnt cigarette box in a transparent sealed bag, and there was also a matchbox. The interrogator suddenly asked, Is this yours? No. Han Bingjiang glanced at it and directly denied. But his expression betrayed him. As an interrogator, it was easy to see that Han Bingjiang was a little flustered at this time. He then said indifferently, We found an auntie who is in charge of cleaning. She said that she saw you in the smoking room for a long time. There is no doubt that you are a person with a smoking habit. There must be cigarette butts left by you in the smoking room, right? As long as we check the residue of your saliva on the filter and compare the type of the cigarette box, it should be easy to find something, right? Han Bingjiang's eyebrows twitched. He gritted his teeth and said, I will remain silent. And the match? The security checkpoint has clearly stated that no flammable or explosive items are allowed in. The interrogator stared at Han Bingjiang. Why did you bring the match in? Han Bingjiang turned his head away. The interrogator suddenly shouted, Because you had planned this all along. The cigarettes and matches are the timers you use to make the incendiary bombs, aren't they? You killed the victim in cold blood, didn't you? You're planning to use this explosion to create chaos so that you can leave, right? Tell me, why did you kill the victims? Nonsense. This is all conjecture and framing. I want to sue you. Han Bingjiang was also very nervous. I've already said many times that I was framed. If what you said was true, why would I wait until the explosion before leaving? Instead of leaving early, where are your brains? That's where you're smart. The interrogator sneered. You deliberately used this method that ordinary people wouldn't do to pretend that you were framed. Yes, although it doesn't seem to make sense, what if you directed and acted it yourself? No one is framing you at all. *T. Han Bingjiang pounded the table angrily with both hands. Are you blind? I've already said that Xiaoan was behind me. There are so many surveillance cameras in the airport. Didn't you see them? Where are the surveillance records? I'm sorry, we've already checked the surveillance records. Another interrogator said calmly, We didn't find the person you're talking about. Even the surveillance cameras didn't capture you going into the washroom. There's only the image of you coming out. There's no Xiaoan at all. In addition, Xiaoan did exist in the airport, but according to the time of the explosion, she was in the guard room at that time. We have at least 2 airport guards who can prove it. And according to what you said, you and Xiaoan went straight to guard room 47 after hearing the broadcast. May I ask, how could Xiaoan appear beside you and in the guard room at the same time? Impossible. Impossible. Hearing this, Han Bingjiang stood up unbelievably. He even impulsively grabbed the collar of an interrogator. Liar! You're framing me. You're colluding to frame me. I'll sue you. Because Han Bingjiang lost his mind, 2 guards rushed in from outside the interrogation room and pressed Han Bingjiang directly on the table. Liar. Liar. It's not true. It can't be true. It's a liar. See for yourself. This is the surveillance video we pulled out. The interrogator turned the chair at this time. A TV in the corner of the interrogation room directly showed the image of the guard room at that time. The time was right. Han Bingjiang stared at the image of the guardroom in a daze. The young man and woman with Paul were clearly there, as well as Qiao En and a foreign youth, and 2 guards. Qiao En and a foreign youth who seemed to be her boyfriend. This was exactly the reason why Han Bingjiang came to the airport. How could this be? Impossible, this is impossible. Han Bingjiang struggled hard at this time. This is impossible. This is impossible. Right. The clothes are different. The clothes are different. The Qiao and I met was not wearing this clothes, she was wearing a headscarf. Their clothes were different. They were different. They were not the same person, not the same person. Believe me. I'm innocent, believe me. Han Bingjiang. You said Qiao En was with you and she framed you, and then you said Qiao En's clothes were different, and they were not the same person. You can't justify yourself at all. The interrogator slammed the table at this time. Tell the truth. Why did you kill the victim in such a cruel way? Who was the victim? It's not me. It's not me. It's not. At this time, Han Bingjiang suddenly closed his eyes at this time. His whole body softened, and he fainted on the ground. He seems to have fainted. At this time, a special police at this time pressed Han Bingjiang's Renjong point, but found no response. Seeing this, the interrogator saw this, frowning. He glanced at the camera in the interrogation room, which was now open to the public. Although he more or less felt that Han Bingjiang was pretending to be unconscious, they could not use violent means to interrogate him. Call the doctor. The interrogator shook his head, saying helplessly, Wait until he wakes up. 2 special police officers took Han Bingjiang out of the interrogation room. At this time, the other 2 interrogators in the interrogation room frowned at this time. This matter was actually like what Han Bingjiang said, there were still some doubts in this matter. However, the surveillance video could not be falsified. Still can't find the identity of the victim? The time is too short, the victim has no identification with her, we can only guess that she is a young woman, and the time of death is less than 3 hours. The other interrogator was asked, shaking his head, There is no missing person report, seems that we can only wait for the DNA to match. Well, by the way, do you think there are really 2 Qiao Ens? How is that possible? Do you think you are shooting a movie with a double? Let's wait for the criminal investigation team in the city. They should be here soon. We can only interrogate for the time being. That's true. Let's check the video again. It doesn't make sense that Han Bingjiang went into the bathroom. Okay. The 2 interrogators hurried to study the case in the interrogation room. 2 Qiao Ens. Song Ying was very sure that she was not hallucinating, but it was hard to believe that there were 2 Qiao Ens, but she was not alone here. There were also Luoqiu, Song Haoran, Master Song, and even Mr. Seven, the receptionist, and so on. Maybe they are twins or something. Mr. Seven was not surprised at this time. Although they look the same, their temperaments are a little different, so they should not be the same person. Because the Qiao Ens did not involve the safety of the Song family, it was completely out of Seven's task, so he was not interested in it at all. Xiaoying, don't worry about other people's business for the time being. Master Song said at this time, since there is a murder here, I'm afraid that the police will intervene soon. 7, if possible, arrange for us as soon as possible. Master Song, don't worry. 7 said, I'll take you back to the hotel later. And don't worry, as long as you stay in the room, I'm sure no one will disturb you. That's good. Song Tianyu nodded and then hammered his shoulder. Well, I've been tired all day. My bones can't bear it anymore. Grandpa, are you all right? Song Ying came to Song Tianyu with concern. At this time, her concern about her grandpa's physical condition had overshadowed her curiosity about the Qiao Ens. Song Ying hurriedly massaged Master Song's shoulders. Because there was no problem with explosives, the flights from now until the morning were temporarily suspended. The airport hurriedly arranged a large number of people to deal with the stranded passengers. Soon after, part of the alert of the airport was temporarily lifted, and the Song family could return to the hotel again. However, after showering, Song Ying couldn't sleep. She thought about the two Qiaoans, so she went to Luochio's room and knocked on the door. However, after knocking for a long time, there was no response. Is this dead head already asleep? Song Ying frowned with a helpless expression. The moment she was about to leave, she found Song Haoran standing behind her with a smile on his face. Song Ying was startled. Xiaoying, are you planning a night attack at this time of the night? Song Haoran asked suddenly. It's none of your business. No. Say that again if you dare. Song Haoran. Shoo. Unexpectedly, Song Haoran made a shushing gesture and then magically pulled out a room card from his sleeve. Song Haoran placed the room card in front of the door, and the electronic lock of the door opened instantly. Song Ying opened her eyes wide and pointed at Song Haoran. You, how did you get it? I got an extra card at the front desk. Song Haoran shrugged and then opened the door with a smile. He said directly without entering the room, Little Luochio, do you want to listen to a bedtime story? I'll send you a beauty to serve you, don't talk nonsense. And keep your voice down. Won't you feel embarrassed if you wake her up? Song Ying grabbed Song Haoran's ear and warned him in a low voice. Where is he? Song Haoran looked at the room in confusion. There was no one in the room. The bed was folded and didn't seem to have been used. There was no one in the bathroom. It could only mean that Luochio was not here. She filled a paper cup with warm water from the water dispenser. Dressed in a black windbreaker, Joan carefully protected the paper cup with both hands, fearing that the water inside would spill out. She was now in a members' lounge in the boarding building of an airline. There was no one in the lounge at this time because most of the passengers were arranged in the same place. Paul, drink some water first. Qiaoan handed the paper cup to Paul and stroked Paul's face. Paul, you have to be obedient, okay? I'm your mother, okay? Paul nodded timidly. If you're hungry, eat these. Joan pointed at the food on the table. These were the food prepared for members in the lounge. Seeing that Paul still nodded, Qiaoan smiled. Then she stood up, gritted her teeth, and began to twist a turquoise ring on her finger. She seemed to want to do something with the ring, but the ring didn't seem to do what Joan wanted. She couldn't help but frown, and she gradually became anxious. Why can't you do it? Qiaoan's expression grew more and more anxious. In the end, she even took off the ring and wiped it with her clothes. Move it. I beg of you, hurry up and move it. Well, it seems that you don't know how to use this thing. Suddenly, a third voice sounded in the VIP lounge, which was supposed to be empty. Qiaoan turned around in horror. It was the young man. Is this the item you used to transfer? The young man. Luochio looked at the turquoise ring in Joan's hand. What do you want to do? Joan stepped back in horror. While retreating, she put Paul behind her to protect him. Luochio shook his head. I don't want to do anything. Especially for a mother who can protect her child in the first place, I don't want to do anything to her. It's just that Paul left something with me, and I plan to return it to him. With that, Luochio took off the school bag from his shoulder, looking at Joan. This is Paul's school bag. You left in such a hurry that you forgot to take it. At the sight of his school bag, Paul walked out from behind Qiaoan at once. However, in the next second, Qiaoan pressed him down. Let me do it. Joan quickly walked to Luochio, grabbed the school bag, and then stepped back cautiously. Besides, I was going to send him back, Luochio said indifferently, but it seems that it's not that simple. I don't know what you're talking about. Joan still looked at Luochio warily. She watched Luochio's movements carefully. Suddenly, she held Paul in her arms, lowering her head and trying to rush out of the door. Luochio suddenly asked, What year is it in your world? The black-clothed Qiaoan suddenly stopped. Luochio slowly turned around and asked, To be exact, what year is it in your world? Chapter 975. Qiaoan looked at Luochio in horror and didn't say a word. In fact, she was afraid of this young man's eyes when she took Paul away from him, What year was it now? This was supposed to be her biggest secret, but how did this young man know about it? He even seemed to know about the ring. You. Are you also? Xiao An's mind pointed to an answer that he could understand. Me? Luoqiu shook his head. I've always been here. At least, I haven't left this place yet. Then how did you? Xiaoan was surprised. This was a person who could easily convince others. Instinctively, Xiaoan did not feel that the other party was lying. Luoqiu said simply, just like the ring on your hand. Since it exists, it's normal to have other things that don't conform to common sense. Xiaoan frowned, but kept a distance from Luoqiu. Can I have a look at the ring? Luoqiu suddenly asked. Xiaoan was shocked and stepped back. But Luoqiu said, Miss Xiaoan, don't you want to know why the ring can't be used now? You just want to get it from me. Xiaoan said with a trembling voice, but at this moment her hand stretched out uncontrollably. Her clenched hand even opened little by little, exposing the ring in her palm. Obviously, this wasn't Xiao An's intention. Her body was no longer under her control, and she immediately became even more terrified. The degree of fear was no less than when she had first obtained the ring's function. But her body soon returned to normal. She clenched the ring in her palm again. Xiaoan suddenly looked at Luoqiu. Luoqiu said lightly, I hope you can understand that it's not a big trouble for me to snatch it. So, can I have a look at it? Xiaoan clenched his teeth, but in the end, he didn't have the courage to run away. Her footsteps were hesitant, but in the end she still walked to Luoqiu's side. She slowly opened her palm again, and her face was full of uneasiness. At this moment Luoqiu took out a brand new handkerchief and covered his palm with it. After that, he picked up the ring from Xiaoan's palm and started to check it carefully. I met a Miss Xiaoan in the guardhouse. She was much calmer than you, probably because she's an actress, Luoqiu said suddenly. Xiaoan was stunned for a moment before he smiled bitterly. I'm not an actor. We're different. I think I know why it can't be activated. Luoqiu quickly handed the ring back to Johann. It seemed that Xiaoan felt it incredible that Luoqiu returned the ring in such a short time. When the feeling of the ring falling into his palm was transmitted to his brain, Xiaoan in black clothes didn't react at all. You! She stared at him blankly. It's because of the energy. Luoqiu said slowly, the energy in this ring has been used up. I guess it's because it's been used too many times. If you want to activate it again, you have to charge it. That's the simplest way. How? Xiaoan gaped. The ring failed because of such a simple reason. Then do you know how to charge it? Before that, I want to know where you're going first. Luoqiu looked at Xiaoan without blinking. Which must be the world where Paul and I live. Xiaoan said excitedly. Luoqiu closed his eyes. After a long while, he opened them again and sighed. He said calmly, I'm sorry, I don't know how to charge it now. What? Xiaoan opened her mouth in surprise. At the same time, Luoqiu glanced at Paul. Paul suddenly buried his head on Xiao An's shoulder, grasping the clothes on Xiao An's shoulder tightly. Take good care of this kid, and I believe you will too. Luoqiu suddenly said, also, please consider whether you want to kill yourself to get the life you want. I don't understand. You'll understand. I have something else to do, so I'll leave first. Luoqiu said. Suddenly, he stepped back from Xiaoan and gradually disappeared. Wait, come back, come back. At this time, there was no third party in the lounge except for Joan and Paul. Xiaoan lowered her head, her body trembling slightly. Paul called out softly, Mom. Xiaoan's body trembled, and he quickly raised his head with a smile on his face. Paul, be a good boy. You have to be obedient, okay? Mommy will protect you. No one can separate us from each other. Of course, of course. Paul lowered his head in horror again and quietly looked at Xiaoan's palm. He trembled and clenched it tightly. His nails dug into his skin and his knuckles turned white. Ring, ring. Xiao suddenly looked at the ring in her palm, and a crazy idea popped up in her mind. Since this ring has no energy, then other rings may have energy. Paul, we will definitely go to a happy world where no one will hurt us and separate us. Thank you. Agamos took 2 bottles of water and a heated lunchbox from the airport staff and quickly returned to Xiao An's side. The airport was not worried about the material problem. After all, there were not many passengers at this time. Currently, the alert in some areas had been lifted and people were being transferred. However, every passenger had to undergo an identity check before they could leave. This wasn't something unacceptable, even though there were already quite a number of tourists making a scene because of the chaos. Almost all the manpower that could be transferred from the airline and airport had been transferred, but they still couldn't digest the current situation in a short period of time. There were too many people waiting in line. Agamos and Xiao could only sit aside helplessly. Let's eat something. We don't know how long we have to wait. Agamos looked at the long line and sat down helplessly. At this time, Xiao lifted the blanket on her body and covered Agamos with it. The two of them sat together quietly with a blanket draped over their shoulders. Xiao rested her head on Agamos' shoulder and narrowed her eyes. No one knew what she was thinking. Do you remember the concert in New York last winter? Agamos suddenly said. Concert. Xiao looked up at Agamos in confusion. Agamos nodded, smiled, and said, You don't remember? Last winter, we secretly went to watch the concert. In order not to be noticed, we deliberately bought tickets early. In the end, it even snowed that day. In the open-air venue, everyone finished watching with blankets draped over their shoulders, just like now. Yes, I don't know how I insisted on watching it. Xiao lowered her head and leaned on Agamos' chest. Maybe it's because you were by my side. You really know how to talk. Agamos smiled. I don't know who was the one who wanted to leave in the first place. Did I? Xiao closed her eyes. That was you. Agamos just smiled and did not care about Xiao An's denial. Xiao suddenly said, Agamos, let's get married? Married? Agamos lowered his head and looked at Xiao. He looked at this Asian woman whom he had decided on a long time ago. Looking into her eyes, he felt like he was looking into her heart. He subconsciously said, But didn't you say that you wouldn't consider it before you achieve your dream? Xiao held Agamos' hands. It's unfair to make you wait for me. Besides, there's no rule that says I can't act after I get married. I don't want to put on the label the company gave me. I'm Xiao, I'm myself. Xiao, Agamos said affectionately. Xiao smiled. It was the kind of smile that could move men, just like the one she had played in the movie she had won an award for last year. It made people pity her almost instantly. It was because of this smile that she was able to stand out from many competitors and successfully win the Newcomer Award. I want to give birth to a child for you. Xiao leaned on Agamos' chest again. I'll teach him how to act, and you'll teach him how to compose. He'll definitely be an outstanding person in the future. Our family will be very happy. It's a future that I can't help but look forward to. Agamos hugged her and lowered his head to smell her hair. He smiled and said, I don't know why, but I feel like you've suddenly become mature and gentle. Are you looking down on me? Xiao raised her head and rolled her eyes at him. This was a charm that was hard to see at Xiao An's age. Agamos could not help but lower his head to kiss Xiao An's lip. She responded passionately. After a long time, Agamos finally parted, panting slightly. Oh my God! I never knew you were such a good kisser. You're so passionate. Xiao reached out and pinched Agamos' waist gently, and whispered in his ear, When we get married, I'll give myself to you. Agamos, my love. This was probably a declaration that no man could resist. Agamos only felt that at this moment, his male instincts were a little difficult to control, and his heart was beating fast. How did she become so mesmerizing? Miss Xiao in the airport, after hearing the broadcast, Please go to XX Airlines temporary office immediately. Miss Chowan in the airport, please. Suddenly, he remembered that there had been several broadcasts in 2 different languages. The sound of the broadcast instantly alarmed the lovers. Agamos and Chowan looked up at the same time, both frowning. What's going on? Why did the broadcast call for you? Agamos looked surprised. Chowan lowered her head. I don't know either. But let's get out of here first. Agamos was stunned, and then he reacted. After the broadcast, there was some commotion at the scene. Perhaps many people had not seen Chowan in person, but there were definitely many who had seen the movie she acted in last year. Most of them had heard the name of this newcomer from various sources. Chowan? Why does this name sound so familiar? Could it be Chowan, the winner of the Best Newcomer Award? Wow, I'm actually in the same place as her? She's my goddess. The discussion gradually became lively. Agamos stood up at once, and at the same time, pulled Chowan up with his hands on her shoulders. The 2 of them lowered their heads and quickly left the place. You could not blame the police for being the last to arrive, because they were only notified after the incident had happened. Where is the victim? The forensic doctor hurried to the scene, took the work sign, and opened the cordon. The entrances to the 2 washrooms had been sealed, and 3 guards were standing guard here. Inside the men's washroom, one of the guards quickly pointed. The forensic doctor did not say much, and hurriedly led his assistant into the men's washroom. However, not long after, the forensic doctor hurried out. Where's the body? Did you move the body? No, it's covered with a white cloth. Isn't that? The guard suddenly looked surprised, because in the men's washroom, where the body was placed, there was only a white cloth. How could the victim's body be seen? Only a large amount of blood was left at the scene. How could it be? The guards looked at the scene in panic, because, not only them, but many of the airport's special police officers could prove that the horrifying body was clearly lying there. No one came in. We've been guarding here all along, so it's even more impossible for anyone to take the body out. But the body, how could the body be missing? How could such a strange thing happen? The forensic doctor frowned. He believed in science. You look around, I'll look for clues here, and inform more people to come here. Okay. It was really a scary day. It was supposed to be time to get off work early. The bloated cleaner sighed at this moment. Not only was the airport temporarily closed due to an unknown explosion, but she was also called in by the airport's special police officers for questioning. The guy who hid in the smoking room and smoked fiercely was obviously not a good person. Little punk, how could I get off work late? The cleaner was now angrily beating the dirty water in the bucket with a mop to vent her dissatisfaction. She had to clean several washrooms on this floor before she could get off work. Of course, the airport had temporarily stopped all the work on hand, but if they really waited for the airport to resume work, who knew when they would be able to get off work? So she had to come here quietly. She casually put the wet mop on the ground and started to mop the floor. However, when she came to a certain cubicle, she saw some red liquid flowing out from the door. What the hell, who's inside? The cleaner knocked on the door. The floor is dirty. Answer me. But no matter how she shouted, there was no response from the cubicle, but more red liquid flowed out. The cleaner frowned and squatted down. She lay on her stomach on the ground and peeked inside through the crack in the door. Ah! The cleaner suddenly screamed. Standing up and grabbing her collar in horror, she saw a woman lying in a pool of blood through the crack of the door. Help! Save me! Save me! Help! But the cleaner did not shout for a long time, and directly fell to the ground, but strangely, her body did not directly hit the floor, but seemed to be supported by something, so that she did not need to touch the ground. You've worked hard. It was Luacio's soft voice. Have a good rest, and forget this when you wake up. Luacio waved his hand, sending the cleaner aside and sitting down against the wall. After that, Luacio put his hand on the door lock of the cubicle, and then gently pushed it. The door was opened immediately. He saw a woman who had been stripped of almost all her clothes, leaving only her underwear. At this time, she was lying next to the toilet. Her body was curled up. Her wrist had been cut, and a lot of blood had flowed out, leading to the other 2 cubicles. It was Xiao, and Luoqiu frowned and then snapped his fingers. Chapter 976. The phone can't be connected. I don't know what's going on. In the hotel room, Song Ying frowned and looked at Song Haoran. She had just called Luoqiu 3 times, but couldn't get through. No, should I inform Grandpa? Song Ying hurriedly looked at Song Haoran. Song Haoran lowered his head and seemed to be thinking about something. After hearing Song Ying's question, he raised his head and said, "No need, let's go look for it ourselves. Maybe he just can't sleep, so he's wandering outside. Now Dad is asleep, there's no need to wake him up. Then I'll ask Uncle Wu to send someone to look for him." Song Ying nodded and agreed with Song Haoran. Song Haoran shook his head. Uncle Wu probably won't dare to hide anything from Dad now. Let's not inform him. I'm better at finding people. Song Ying was stunned and suddenly remembered Song Haoran's intuition that seemed to be favored by the god of luck. Indeed, Song Haoran had always been convincing people with his terrifying intuition. Song Haoran patted Song Ying's head and smiled. "Don't worry, I'll definitely find Luoqiu for you. Don't worry." "What do you mean by find him for me?" Song Haoran just smiled. "Hurry up, if he goes too far, I won't look for him." "That's true, but how should I find him?" Song Ying sighed in distress. "I have no clue. Let's go to the guard room and ask first." Song Haoran suddenly said, "Didn't that guy come back with a child's school bag?" "School bag?" Song Ying was stunned and reacted, "Paul's?" Song Haoran nodded. "There's no such school bag in the room. It should be Luoqiu who took it out. Maybe he planned to return it to someone or send it directly to the guard room. In fact, he was very reliable." Song Ying nodded. "If he was more serious, it would be perfect. It was probably in a restaurant called Little Alley Hall, but the restaurant was already closed." Qiaowen was lying on a soft seat in the restaurant. She slowly woke up and looked at her surroundings. She was obviously very confused and even frightened by her surroundings. At the same time, she felt extremely weak and powerless. Suddenly, Qiaowen seemed to recall something and reached out to touch her own body. Her clothes were gone, replaced by a large coat. It was a man's coat, but it was obviously not a Gimos's. But she only had her underwear left. Most women would feel uneasy if they encountered such a situation. "Are you awake?" Suddenly, a man's voice came from behind. Qiaowen turned around in horror and saw a young man walking over with a bag in his hand. This made Qiao extremely nervous and fearful. "Yua, what do you want to do? What did you do to me? Don't come over." "Well, would you like to put on your clothes first?" The young man. Luoqiu put down the bag at this time. "Put on your clothes first, I'll wait outside." "You." Qiaowen opened her mouth. "Oh, by the way, I've paid for the clothes." Luoqiu pointed to a closed fashion store downstairs, and then leisurely walked to the outside of the restaurant. Qiaowen was still uneasy, but she felt even worse because she was almost naked. She reached out to take the bag, then squatted under the seat, looking at the young man standing outside the restaurant with his back to her, and quickly put on her clothes. Well, the style was just average, but not annoying. Qiaowen looked at herself in surprise. She was wearing a checkered shirt and a pair of dark blue jeans. "You? How did you?" After putting on her clothes, Qiaowen came to Luoqiu anxiously. "Why are you here? Weren't you in the guard room with your girlfriend?" Luoqiu turned around and stared at Qiaowen for a while, then suddenly said, "So, the Qiaowen who was with us just now was you? With you just now?" Qiaowen frowned. "What are you talking about?" Luoqiu shook his head and suddenly said, "Nothing. When I found you, you were left in the bathroom, and your clothes. I was going to call the airport guards, but they seem to be very busy now. You don't know yet, probably when you were in a coma, there was an explosion here, and it seems that a woman died. I heard that her death was quite gruesome, and her face was cruelly skinned by the murderer. Qiaowen was shocked when she heard this. Luoqiu continued, "But since you're awake, go and report it. By the way, why did you faint? Do you remember who knocked you out?" "I don't know who it was." Qiaowen quickly shook her head. "I just wanted to hide from the two guards, but when I was in the washroom, someone suddenly covered my mouth and nose with something from behind. Then I don't know what happened after that." "Agamos, where is Agamos?" "Probably at the temporary workplace of XX Airlines," Luoqiu said casually. "I just heard the broadcast, and asked Miss Qiaowen to go there after hearing the broadcast. I think if you disappeared, your male friend would be very worried. So, he should go there after hearing the broadcast. Do you want to go there?" "Why did the broadcast call me?" Qiaowen looked at Luoqiu confusedly. She kept a distance from Luoqiu all the time. She had only met this young man once in the guard room, and had no idea who he was. "Unfortunately, when I found you, you had lost everything." Luoqiu shook his head. "Otherwise, maybe you could contact Mr. Agamos through your cell phone, and maybe you would know something. Can you lend me your cell phone?" "Of course." Qiaowen took the cell phone and quickly dialed. Although the call went through, it kept ringing, but no one answered. Qiaowen's expression gradually became nervous and worried. "No one is listening." Qiaowen looked at Luoqiu in fear. Luoqiu said indifferently, "Then report the case first. After all, you were attacked. Find my friend first." Qiaowen shook her head, glanced at Luoqiu, and suddenly said, "It doesn't matter if you just lost some belongings. You know my identity. Once you report the case, I don't want the media to know." While speaking, Qiaowen anxiously grasped her arm, and said with a trembling voice, "In the past, there have been celebrities who were stripped naked and then photographed. You understand, right? If something happened to a celebrity and they couldn't make it public, it was really something that they couldn't do anything about, such a reason." "I understand." Luoqiu smiled, and then glanced at Qiaowen's feet. She rushed out without shoes. "Don't you wear shoes?" Qiaowen gave a start, looked at her feet, and found that she really didn't wear shoes. She couldn't help feeling embarrassed. "There's a pair of shoes in the bag." Luoqiu said indifferently, "Flats, I think it's more suitable for you to act." "Thank you." Qiaowen nodded. "Ring, as long as there are other rings," that was what she thought, and this thought gradually corrupted some things. The black-clothed Joanne held Paul in her arms, lowered her head, and sat on an empty staircase. "Is there a reason to kill yourself to get the life you want?" The mysterious young man's words were still ringing in her ears. Others might not understand the meaning of this sentence. But Qiaowen in black obviously understood, and also knew the specific operation method. The root of all this was the emerald green ring that he was holding. The Eye of Horus was the name of this ring. On the day when Qiaowen in black's whole world became chaotic, the crazy woman who also wore the Eye of Horus ring appeared in front of her. The woman who had the same appearance, surname, and even the same soul as herself, but had different lives. Another version of herself. Yes, it was on that day, the day she separated from Paul, the day she was in a car accident, she suddenly appeared in a similar world that also had her, but was completely different. According to her own understanding, if the world she was in was World 1, then the world she was suddenly transferred to after the car accident was World 2, then the crazy woman, the crazy her probably came from the unknown World 3. She came from World 3 and directly killed her in World 2, and then let her in World 1 witness the process. At the same time, the black-clothed Joanne also saw how the Joanne of World 3 killed the Joanne of World 2 and left calmly, using the Eye of Horus ring. She wanted to go back to her own World 1. But she could not freely use the Eye of Horus ring she had. In the limited number of times she jumped between different worlds, she could not return to her original World 1. She knew that she was here, but the energy of the Eye of Horus ring was exhausted. It was too scary. It was really too scary. Every time she thought of how Qiaowen in World 3 kept killing her in other worlds, Chiaoan in black would feel a chill from the bottom of her heart. That me? No, that woman was a complete lunatic. She had a completely rotten soul, and could not be her at all. She jumped to many worlds, replaced her in many worlds, and then suddenly jumped away. What was her purpose? If he hadn't been in that car accident in World 1 and accidentally jumped to World 2 to witness this scene, he wouldn't have met this crazy Chiaoan in World 1. This unknown Chiaoan would have come knocking on his door and then kill and replace her? Chiaoan in black did not dare to think too much. She could only resist instinctively. Not only did she have to let herself go back to World 1, but she also had to make this crazy Chiaoan unable to jump successfully again. The ring, she had to take all the Eye of Horus from the crazy Chiaoan. Or kill. No one can separate us, Paul. Chiaoan in black hugged Paul tightly at this time. The child had been tired for a day and had fallen asleep. Mom will be back soon. Chiaoan in black put Paul down, took off her coat and covered Paul with it. Wearing only a white sweater, she took out a scarf, covered her chin and mouth, and quickly left. The broadcast. She had heard the broadcast of the airport looking for Chiao, and aren't we going to the place mentioned by the broadcast? Agmos looked at the place where he was now with some surprise. This was obviously not the way to the place mentioned by the broadcast. I don't want to go there. Chiaoan shook her head. There must be a lot of people there. Let's call later and ask what's going on. If it can be solved verbally, there's no need to go there in person. Agmos nodded and suggested, let's go to the arrival hall. The checked luggage should have arrived. Let's see if we can take it. When we can leave later, it'll be more convenient. We don't have to rush to get the luggage. Okay. Chiaoan nodded happily and sighed. I really hope I can go home immediately and lie in bed. I don't have to think about anything. A woman in a white sweater with a scarf wrapped around the lower half of her face passed by Chiaoan and Agmos. Agmos suddenly stopped and turned to look at the woman in the white sweater who was passing by. What's wrong? Chiaoan looked at Agmos in confusion, then looked at the back of the woman in the white sweater and frowned subconsciously. No, I feel like I've seen her somewhere before. Agmos shook his head. Maybe it's an illusion. It's okay, let's go. Chiaoan nodded and looked at the woman in the white sweater again, but she had already disappeared around the corner. But just as the two of them turned to continue on their way, something suddenly knocked into them from behind. Agmos and Chiaoan were knocked to the ground at the same time. Agmos looked up in a panic, only to see the woman in the white sweater, who should have walked past him, straddling Joan's body and strangling Joan's neck. What are you doing? Agmos was shocked and angry at the same time. He pounced on the woman in the white sweater and pushed her to the ground. Joanne. Agmos hurriedly helped Joanne up. Chiaoan was coughing with difficulty. At the same time, the woman in the white sweater on the ground stood up quickly. Agmos scolded the woman angrily. Are you crazy? We know. Chiaoan? Why? When she stood up from the ground, the scarf around her neck had been loosened, revealing her real face. At this moment, she and Agmos' eyes met directly. There are two Chiaoanis? Agmos looked at Chiaoan who he was protecting behind him. But at this moment, he felt a terrible pain spreading from his abdomen, spreading rapidly. Agmos looked at his abdomen in disbelief. Chiaoan behind him. Chiaoan, who told him not long ago that she wanted to get married, now had a cold look in her eyes and a small fork in her hand, stabbing it into his abdomen. It's not easy to come across such a good world, but why is it still so difficult? Chiaoan looked at Agmos expressionlessly. In that case, just destroy it, my dear. Chapter 977. Joanne in the white sweater, Joanne in the hoodie, and Agmos were not the only ones. Although the passageway was deserted, there were still pedestrians. Those who had witnessed the incident looked at Agmos, who was lying on the ground, in shock. Obviously, the newcomers did not know who Agmos was. They could not even see what the two women and one man looked like. But when one of them suddenly attacked and the other fell to the ground, It made people want to know what had happened. Seeing that there were pedestrians rushing over, the two Joans had different expressions on their faces. The Joan who attacked Agamos frowned and seemed rather irritated, while the Joan who wore a white sweater gritted his teeth, turned around, and ran back to where he came from. Joanne in the hoodie snorted, but soon her expression changed slightly, because she found that the Eye of Horus ring on her finger had disappeared. When did this happen? Was it when she was pinned to the ground and strangled? Was the target actually the ring on her finger? Joanne in the hoodie's eyes instantly turned cold. She took a step forward and caught up with the fleeing Joanne in the white sweater. "Hey! Don't go!" The two pedestrians rushed over, but when they saw Agamos lying on the ground, they found that his abdomen was bleeding. They could not care less about catching up with the murderous woman and quickly called for help. Joanne Agamos fell to the ground in pain and embarrassment. In his hazy vision, the two Jonas in front of him were running away, one in front of the other. It was as if they were chasing something. He had never seen Joanne like this. When she said that she wanted to destroy everything without any emotion, but called him dear. It was as if he had lost everything, and his body was just an empty shell. It was just a moving, rotting corpse. In a trance, Agamos slowly closed his eyes. He could no longer hear the shouts of the people around him, and his vision slowly narrowed. In the end, he only saw the back of Qiaoan, who was walking away until she disappeared. She seemed to be chasing after something. The body is missing? The head of the criminal police brigade, who had just arrived, was very surprised. He was listening to a ridiculous report. There was actually a follow-up to the disappearance of the victim's body in the bathroom. When the forensic doctor came back after searching for clues, he found that the bloodstains that should have been left next to the corpse had disappeared. The bloodstains were not erased, because the forensic doctor had already used an ultraviolet light to examine the bloodstains. The bloodstains had indeed disappeared. Han Bingjiang hadn't woken up yet, but the victim's body and blood had disappeared without a trace. If even the body couldn't be found, then how could Han Bingjiang be convicted? Due to the disappearance of the corpse, the case instantly fell into a deadlock, and there was no progress. Who is that? Is it Qiaoan? Hasn't she appeared yet? The head of the criminal police brigade asked helplessly. Han Bingjiang had mentioned Qiaoan several times during the interrogation, so the police decided to broadcast the search for Qiaoan over and over again. It might not be useful, but at least it would alarm people. If the case really had something to do with this female star, there should be some clues. Qiaoan didn't appear, but we just received a report of a malicious injury in Area C. A foreign young man was stabbed in the stomach with a sharp weapon, and the weapon was a fork used for Western food. A fork. The captain was shocked. According to the report, the weapon used by the corpse in the bathroom was likely to be a Western food fork. At that time, Han Bingjiang was arrested because the fork was broken when he was leaving with his blood-stained clothes. Fork, body, blood. The captain suddenly frowned. Go and see if the blood on the clothes used by Han Bingjiang to wrap the weapon is still there. The team members were stunned, but under the fierce eyes of the captain, they quickly did as he said. The team member quickly walked out. Not long after, the team member hurriedly came back with a sealed bag. With a panicked expression, he said, "Captain, the bloodstains on the clothes are gone. What happened?" At this moment, the captain couldn't help but open his mouth in surprise. This was because he had seen this piece of clothing before he arrived, and it was indeed stained with blood. He could not believe his own eyes, because the eyes were always wrong, but what if everyone's eyes were wrong? It's so weird. He muttered to himself, and suddenly said, Who attacked the foreign young man just now? Hurry up and catch this person. I have a feeling that the answer may be on this person. Move. Yes. Song Haoran walked casually in the airport with Song Ying. Song Haoran always had a smile on his face, so Song Ying didn't feel nervous at all. This made Song Ing feel that Song Hauran was somewhat similar to Luocio. It seemed that he was always anxious. Although he knew he had this problem, he couldn't change it no matter what. Sometimes it really made people envious, but sometimes it also made people anxious. By the way, what's the name of that child? Song Hauran suddenly stopped and asked Song Ing. You mean Paul? Song Ing answered subconsciously. Song Hauran nodded, and then turned around instantly, walking to the stairs leading to the smoking room. Song Ing helplessly followed, but found that Song Hauran came to a place selling cigarettes next to the smoking room. Song Hauran was now twisting the lock of a door behind the cigarette counter, but in a flash, Song Hauran directly broke the lock and opened the door. Is it this? Song Hauran pointed to the small room used to store sundries and cigarette. Why is it here? Song Ing was stunned. Because in this small room she saw the child named Paul. Paul was wrapped in a long black trench coat at this time. This should be the one worn by Joan who took Paul away in front of them. At the same time, there was another woman in uniform in this small room. She was probably the employee who sold cigarettes here. After being knocked out, she was also placed in this place. It seems that this matter is not so simple? Song Hauran narrowed his eyes and stared at Paul for a while. The school bag is also here. So, Luocio has seen Paul? Song Ing was stunned, frowning. He has contacted Joan in Black. Maybe. Song Hauran nodded, then suddenly squatted down and opened Paul's school bag. Hey, don't rummage through other people's things, it's immoral. Song Ing frowned. Song Hauran tempted. There may be clues. Don't you want to know why there are two Joans? Song Ing. But Song Hauran had already started to rummage through the things in the school bag. It was just some very simple things, a sketchbook, a crayon bag, a small bag of soft candy and some miscellaneous items, nothing worth studying. Song Ing had seen this sketchbook before. Paul took it out and drew it when he was in the guardhouse. Luocio picked it up and looked through it once, but Song Ing didn't pay much attention to it at that time. At this time, Song Hauran also started to rummage through it casually, so he began to put the things back into Paul's school bag. This child, what's the matter? Song Hauran was surprised at this time. What's the matter? Song Ing asked curiously. Song Hauran turned one page of the sketchbook and put it in front of Song Ing. The painting was very simple, and it was not an exaggeration to say that it was crude. However, when one carefully looked at the painting, they could not help but feel a chill run down their spine. In a black room with lines, a woman was holding a knife in her hand, and another woman was lying on the ground. On the ground, there was a lot of color with red crayons. The color of blood. This child, how can he draw this kind of drawing? Song Ing opened her mouth slightly in surprise. It's easy for children to write down what they see. Song Hauran said indifferently, we always feel that children are easy to forget things, but it turns out that children can remember more things than adults, even things that they remember for a lifetime. Then is this how he killed someone? Song Ing couldn't believe it. Things seemed to be getting very interesting. Song Hauran smiled at this time, looking at the sleeping Paul, seemingly thinking of something. Suddenly, Song Hauran picked up Paul and said to Song Ing, Come, let's hide first. Maybe there will be a good show later. Since we hid him here, he should be back soon. Wait. Seeing that Song Hauran had begun to hide with Paul in his arms, Song Ing could only quickly carry her school bag, then close the door of the storage room, and then sighed and followed. How should I put it? Being by Song Hauran's side is never boring. But he liked to seek death, which was really tiring. Speaking of which, how did he find out that Paul was hidden inside? The two quickly hid. In fact, they were in the rest area outside the stairs, pretending to be sleeping passengers. Of course, they held Paul and covered him with clothes at the same time. Is this useful? Song Ing frowned and asked. This guy seemed to have forgotten the purpose of coming out. Didn't he say he was looking for Luocio? Aren't they here? Song Hauran suddenly made a gesture of silence, and turned his head slightly, looking back. Joan too. The two Joan Annis, one in front and one behind, were chasing each other at this time. The one in front was wearing a white sweater, and the one behind was wearing a sweater. They were chasing each other very eagerly. Joan Annis, wearing a white sweater, went directly to the stairs leading to the smoking room at this time. It seems that a good show is about to start. Song Howren's mouth smacked. Oh, what time is it now? How can you still have the mood to eat? What are you eating? Jelly candy, just found in the school bag. Do you want to eat it? It tastes good. Song Howren opened his palm at this time. You even snatched the snacks of a child. That's unbelievable. Song Ing rolled her eyes, stood up, and walked to the stairs. She wanted to see what was going on with these two Joan Annis. Song Howren shrugged and carried Paul, then glanced at the jelly candy in his hand. When did this brand come out with this flavor? Why didn't I know before? Song Howren glanced at the production date curiously. July 11, 2025. 2025. Thank you. Joan Annis suddenly said. So Luocio stopped, and looked at her with a curious expression. Joan Annis quickly said, But you saved me, and I didn't thank you properly. It was a bit rude of me. What kind of life do actors have? Luocio suddenly asked. Joan Annis was surprised by this question, and after a while she smiled bitterly. This is not a very good job. Some people love it, some people already hate it but still insist on it. Actually, they are just holding on with difficulty. To be honest, who will remember you decades later? That's true, Luocio nodded and continued. Then let's go, there is not much time left. Luocio suddenly pointed in a direction, which was not the location mentioned in the broadcast. Joan Annis frowned and asked subconsciously, Not much time left, what do you mean? The time left for you. Luocio thought for a moment, then said, Or, the time left for you people is not much, at least, that's what I understand for now. I don't quite understand what you are talking about. Joan Annis looked at Luocio. She had always felt that this young man was very strange, and at this moment, she slightly lowered her guard. Do you believe that everyone is unique? Luocio suddenly asked. Joan Annis just stared at him blankly. Everyone is unique, at least in the same space-time. Luocio said slowly, That's why you won't see another you, and because of that, the space-time will become stable. This is a very complicated theory, but you can also see it as a kind of stability. Each of us is a gear of this world, which gears stop working, which gears need to be replaced, and which ones need to be repaired. These are all things decided by the world itself. Only when order is not in chaos, the whole world will turn normally, just like a clock. However, if there was a non-existent gear in this tight clock, it would break this stability. What do you think the clock will become? I don't quite understand what you are talking about. Haven't you noticed it yet yourself? Luocio said softly, Your hand. Hand. Joan Annis subconsciously raised her arm. My hand. At this moment, what frightened her the most was that her palm was actually fading away, as if it had gone through a process of transparency. She could already see the ground through her palm. It will be erased. Luocio said seriously, You can see it as a self-protection mechanism. It will erase these parts that don't belong here, and try not to leave any trace, so as to ensure the independence of each part, so that order will be restored and time will continue to move forward. Do you understand? I will disappear. What do you mean? Looking at her faded palm, she suddenly stretched out her hand to grab Luocio in horror. However, she couldn't grab Luocio's arm. Her palm directly passed through Luocio's arm. Chapter 978. If all the losses can be recovered. If all the regrets can be made up. If all the regrets can be saved, then, would the result be different? And what is the future? I always felt that the most humbling part of life is not how bleak the present is, but that you can't see the future. I originally thought that life was beautiful, and the future was beautiful. Everyone should think so. Fortunately, after graduation, I found a good and high-paying job in the eyes of others and classmates. Yes, I always felt that I was lucky, but why is everything suddenly different? Yes, I shouldn't have gone back to the company that night. It was raining. It should have been raining. I don't remember that night. Why did I leave the key to the house at the company? Why did I go back? When I went back, I met the boss who was coming back from a social engagement. He was really drunk. I didn't want to do anything, but he pounced on me and tore my clothes. The thunder outside was very loud, and the weight of the boss on me was also very heavy. I was blank. I always thought that this kind of thing would probably only happen in the story of a TV series, in the plot of a novel, and in the news in the newspaper, and never to me. I mustered up the courage to sue this beast of a man, but he said that I seduced him. Yes, I lost the lawsuit because I couldn't afford a good lawyer. Suddenly, the labels of bitch, vixen, shameless, and the like became obvious on me. Then, because of the lawsuit, I became the false accuser and needed to be compensated. Interestingly, the boss said that he understood that I was a recent graduate who wanted to take a shortcut and get to the top in one step. For a while, I got lost on the road of life, so he planned to forgive me and didn't want my compensation. I lost my composure and was ridiculed by everyone. I was delirious. I should be grateful to him, right? So I gave him a very, very good gift. I cut off the tool he used to ruin my life. Well, when I cut off that thing, I didn't feel any sense of revenge. I simply felt that if I cut it off, then what he took from me should be taken back by me. Ah, that's boring. So I ended my own life. I closed my eyes and jumped from the top of the building. I thought it was over until I suddenly woke up. Until I met her. Until I met myself. She was also surprised to see me. She said it was like watching a sci-fi movie. In fact, wasn't I the same? Actually, she was luckier than me because she grew up in a very good family and was truly a rich young lady. She had almost everything that I could only dream of in this strange yet similar world. The interesting thing was that she had many things that I envied, but she told me that what she wanted was not what she already had. She wanted to be free and not be a puppet of her family. What kind of joke is this? What is the future? Obviously, I couldn't have her future. But why could she, and I couldn't? And I need to suffer that pain. Since we are all the same, all the same, all the same, all the same. Then, why don't you disappear? Let me be you in this world. Now I am Joanne, the Joanne of this world. The Eye of Horus ring. Later, I finally discovered its secret, the secret of coming to this strange yet similar world. It can jump through different time and space and bring me to my side. I feel like I have become the human who ate the forbidden fruit in the Garden of Eden. I always feel that at the end of the unknown time and space, there may be unprecedented luck, a truly perfect life waiting for me. What is the future? Joanne walked down the stairs step by step. The fork in her hand was placed on the handrail, making a friction sound. She slowly walked down the stairs while looking at her other self in front of her, Joanne in a white sweater. As for which time and space this Joanne came from, she obviously didn't care much. In front of her, Joanne in a white sweater was frantically opening the door of the storage room behind the cigarette counter. Perhaps because she was too flustered, she didn't notice that the door was actually unlocked. The storage room was not big enough for eyes to see everything. But Joanne in a white sweater obviously didn't find Paul, who was supposed to be here. Only the clerk who was knocked out by her was left here. What is the future? The voice behind her was Joanne's voice. Chiaowen, who was wearing a white sweater, turned around in a panic. Paul was gone, which made her feel very confused. And there was another ferocious version of herself in front of her. She didn't even want to admit that this Joanne was her other self in a different time and space. She was like a beast with endless desires, a demon who released all the evil thoughts in her heart. "You're that person, right?" Chiaowen suddenly asked. This made Joanne in a white sweater open her mouth slightly. Chiaowen's fingers touched the sharp teeth of the fork as she smiled and said, "The guy who has been following me, the one who has been chasing me all this time." Actually, I can feel your presence several times. Do you know why I haven't done anything to you?" Joan, who was wearing a white sweater, leaned against the wall and looked around, trying to find a way to get out of danger. Although she had snatched the eye of Horace from the other party, Paul had disappeared, so it was meaningless. "You haven't done anything to me because you are afraid that I will retaliate, right?" Joanne in a white sweater sneered and said calmly, "Since you know that I have met you several times, you should also know that I can use the ring." Joanne shook her head. "Maybe this is also a factor to consider, but it is not the most important factor. The most important thing is that you and I are actually the same type." Joanne in a white sweater sneered, "Don't think of me as you. You are a complete lunatic. In so many worlds, I have never actively hurt any of my other selves. But you. How many have you killed?" "How many?" Joanne in a white sweater suddenly pursed her lips, as if she was thinking hard. She suddenly smiled. 3, 5, 8, or 10. Maybe more? I don't remember. By the way, I just killed 2 of them. Do you want to know? Joanne in a cold sweat. She didn't understand how such a man-killer demon could be created in a different time and space. 2? Joanne in a white sweater tried to distract her. How can there be 2 of us in this world? Us. Joanne's voice suddenly became cold. I am me, you are you, even if we have the same name, we are independent entities. In my opinion, whether it is you or them, at most, we have the same appearance, but in another time and space, we are enjoying what belongs to me. So, it is you, not us. Joanne in a white sweater took a deep breath. I heard that a skinned female corpse was found in a men's bathroom. You must be the one who did it, right? Yes. Joanne in a white sweater suddenly bit her fingernail. It was her own bad luck. I don't know how she activated the ring's function, but even after coming here, she still didn't notice. She even told me that this world was too magical, and she kept describing her life in the other world to me. She even brought Paul here with her. What a happy person. I've been to so many worlds, but I still haven't been to a place where I could give birth to Paul. No, I haven't experienced the happiness of being a mother either. I really can't help but want to destroy it. Don't find excuses for your cruelty. Joanne in a white sweater said coldly. No matter what, it's one thing to kill her, but you still. It can't be helped, right? Joanne in a cold voice said, It seems that only one Joanne is allowed to appear in each world, so since I'm here, she can't have survived. She can only blame herself for disappearing too slowly, and in a crowded place like the airport. If someone found her, it would be troublesome for me to stay. Joanne in a white sweater smiled. In fact, skinning is really a technical job. If you're not careful, you may not do it well. Joanne in a white sweater was horrified. Even though she had met Joanne in a limited number of jumps, she seemed to be crueler than the previous one. Depravity or corruption. In fact, I quite like this world, because the development of this time and space is too similar to the development of my previous time and space. Since I'm here, it means that I've been reborn. Who doesn't like it? It's like going back to the time before regret. And I'm quite lucky. I happened to meet my enemy in the previous time and space. Han Bingjiang. I didn't expect to meet this guy again, and he's even an entertainment reporter in this time and space. But a leopard can't change its spots. They're all scumbags. No matter what others do in other time and space, they may not do it in this time and space. You're simply a devil. Joanne in a white sweater gritted her teeth, and then suddenly looked behind Joanne in astonishment. Why is there another one? Others might not understand this sentence, but Joanne in a white sweater obviously understood. There was another meaning. Joanne in a white sweater had met 3 different versions of herself here, including the one in white in front of her. One was the one who jumped with Paul. No, from the looks of it, she should have accidentally triggered the ability of the ring, so she was so unguarded. So, it should be said that she and Paul got lost in time and space and came here. The second one was the original star in this time and space, Joanne in a white sweater. The target that Joanne in a white sweater wanted to replace this time. But if there was another one, it was not impossible. Joanne in a white sweater subconsciously looked back, but there was no one on the stairs behind her. In an instant, Joanne in a white sweater felt like the world was spinning around her. Xiaoan in white was on top of her. She pressed her face against the cold floor with all her might. "You can stay here forever. What kind of life you want has nothing to do with me," Joanne in a white sweater said coldly. "I only want my Paul, I only want to take him away. You have nothing to do with me." "Ha ha 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 ha. That's why I said, what's the difference between us? Look at you now." Joanne in a white sweater laughed. "Do we look like each other? Do we look like each other? Now you can use we. I'm different from you," Joanne in a white sweater said angrily. Joanne in a white sweater sneered. "Your child is dead, right? I mean, your child in the original world. Is he also called Paul? Is he dead? Or missing? Did he disappear from your hand?" "Nonsense. I found Paul. You're talking nonsense. 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 Ah!" She felt a sudden stinging pain. Joanne in a white sweater, who was pressed down, mercilessly stabbed the fork into Joanne's waist. The head of the fork sank into Joanne's body. At the same time, Joanne in a white sweater turned over and pressed Joanne to the ground. She sat on Joanne's body, grabbing Joanne's neck with her left hand, while her right hand clenched into a fist, punching Joanne's face mercilessly. She hit Joanne with all her strength. After a while, Joanne in a white sweater stopped, panting, looking at Joanne in a white sweater whose face was covered with blood and her right hand. Her right hand was fading. The white clove Xiaoan's body was also showing the same signs. Joanne in a white sweater spat on Joanne's face. "Tisk, it's already started. The world's correction. It seems that I have to kill you now." While Joanne in a white sweater was dying, Joanne in a white sweater pulled out the fork from Joanne's waist. Joanne in a white sweater screamed in pain. Sweatshirt Xiaoan held the fork with both hands and raised it up, aiming it at Xiaoan's throat. "Mom!" A frightened child screamed from above. Xiaoan raised her head abruptly and saw an unfamiliar man and woman on the walkway at the top of the stairs. She had no idea when they had appeared. The woman's eyes widened as she covered her mouth. She was so shocked that she couldn't speak, while the man was holding a golden-haired child. "Mom! Mom!" The child screamed in horror, but the man suddenly covered his mouth with his hand. The man also looked down at this time and said with a cheeky smile, "Sorry to interrupt you. Although I also have a lot of questions to ask you, I think you don't have time to answer my questions, so I think I'd better digest it myself. Well, do you want jelly beans?" The man shook the soft candy bag in his hand and said embarrassedly, "It seems to be a product from 2025. Joanne in a white sweater dodged Joanne's ring and put it back on her finger, disappearing in a flash. The man holding Paul, Song Hauran, was stunned. "Go to hell." The next second, a murderous voice came from behind. Chapter 979. When Xiaoan attacked Song Hauran from behind, what Song Hauran felt was not fear, but excitement. What was there to be excited about? There were too many mysteries in this world, and he had proven the existence of these mysteries over and over again. These supernatural powers were beyond the comprehension of common sense, but they definitely existed. The badge of the Sun God, Mr. Blind, the three Song brothers, zombies and vampires. He had opened up a corner of a huge world. In a split second, Song Hauran's adrenaline suddenly surged. His reflexes, his strength, and his senses all increased crazily at this moment. His arms, which were hidden in his sleeves, seemed to be gushing with endless strength. Under his skin, a golden light flashed. When Xiaoan's fork was about to pierce the back of Song Hauran's neck, he dodged. Not only did he dodge, but Song Hauran's elbow also struck behind him at this moment. His elbow mercilessly hit Xiaoan's chest. Then, Song Howren suddenly turned around and kicked Xiao An's side with his leg like a long whip. The strength of this spinning kick was so terrifying that Xiao An flew sideways and fell to the ground a few meters away. Phew! Song Howren whistled and threw Paul, who was in his arms, directly to Song Ying. Song Ying hurriedly caught him and instinctively wanted to scold Song Howren's behavior, but Song Howren's face showed a kind of smile that made Song Ying's heart palpitate. She had never seen Song Howren with such a smile. It was like a lion galloping on the African prairie and seeing its prey. Song Ying's words were stuck in her mouth, which made her feel very uncomfortable. At this time, Xiao An coughed a few times and staggered up from the ground, but it was obviously very difficult for her to even stand up. At this time, her body was slightly bent, and she stared at Song Howren. Song Howren slowly pinched his shirt cuffs and stared at Xiao An, saying, "Again, let me see what's going on with your strange movements. Don't let me down." Super intuition. This was the ability given to him by the Sun God's badge. Song Howren didn't know how this horrible perceptive ability worked. The so-called super intuition was just a name he gave himself, but obviously it was very appropriate. Xiao An looked at him coldly. She gradually eased the pain in her body, and at this moment her body disappeared again. This time, both Song Howren and Song Ying saw it very clearly. It had indeed disappeared. She really disappeared. Especially Song Howren, in his super intuition, Xiao An did disappear, as if she had directly disappeared from this world. "Uncle!" Song Ying looked at Song Howren in horror. Song Howren frowned and didn't say anything. He just made a gesture to keep quiet. He still didn't see Xiao An beside him. But at this moment, Song Howren suddenly turned around. At this moment, Xiao An appeared behind him again. But Song Howren was one step faster, and he kicked her with his knee. The violent impact made Xiao An cover her stomach and step back. At the same time, Xiao An stared at Song Howren and her body disappeared again. Song Howren did not move. He stood where he was, his hands hanging down naturally. At the same time, he closed his eyes. At this moment, Xiao An appeared behind Song Howren again. This time, Song Howren took a step to the left and dodged Xiao An's attack. At the same time, he swung his arm and hit the side of Xiao An's head. She had disappeared once again. Song Ying saw a very strange and unbelievable scene. Song Howren closed his eyes throughout the whole process, while Xiao An kept attacking and disappearing. But every attack was useless, and Song Howren easily hit her. Xiao An's expression became more and more gloomy. It was as if she was using her body to hit a hard rock, and her body was covered with cuts and bruises. Are you a monster?" Once again, Xiao An was hit to the ground. This time, she wanted to get up, but the bones in her body seemed to be broken, and the pain almost drained her of her strength. Xiao An spat out a mouthful of blood. At this time, she could only support herself with both hands and barely sit up. Song Howren finally opened his eyes and glanced at Xiao An. "Except for this teleportation ability, it seems that you are just an ordinary person. However, it's a pity that if your reflexes matched this ability, you would have been able to hurt me." Xiao An gritted her teeth and stood up again. But this time, her expression changed slightly. Song Howren also noticed Xiao An's abnormality at this time. She didn't use the teleportation ability again. Song Howren was obviously a person who knew how to grasp the enemy's psychological state. "Oh? You stopped teleporting?" Song Howren chuckled at this time. "Let me guess. It seems that this ability of yours can't be used indefinitely. Is there any restriction? Or, have you used up the number of times it can be used?" Xiao An spat out a mouthful of blood and looked fierce. "Don't be complacent. Give up, you can't beat me." Song Howren said indifferently, "You can't even stand up now. I don't plan to deal with you, I'm just curious about your ability. If possible, I want to ask you a few questions." But right at this moment, Song Ying suddenly cried out in pain. This distracted Song Howren. It turned out that at this moment Paul, who was in Song Ying's arms, bit Song Ying's hand. Paul was able to leave Song Ying's arms and quickly ran toward Xiao An. Paul opened his hands in front of Xiao An and looked at Song Haoran angrily. "This is a bit difficult." Song Haoran frowned. Perhaps he and Song Ying could understand something from the conversation between the two Xiao Ans, but this child obviously couldn't understand. In Paul's eyes, Song Haoran, a stranger, had been beating his mother. As a child, it seemed to be natural for him to protect his mother. Surprisingly, Xiao An suddenly carried Paul in her arms. However, the way she carried Paul was obviously not the way a mother would carry her child. Her arms were around Paul's neck, and she held a fork against his neck. How? Song Ying looked at Xiao An in disbelief. On the other hand, Song Haoran didn't act rashly. Instead, his gaze turned cold. Using a child as a shield, even for a mercenary like him who was used to an iron-blooded life, it was an extremely shameless move. "Stinky man, aren't you good at fighting? Come here." Song Haoran took a deep breath and said indifferently, "Isn't this your child?" "I've never given birth to a child." Xiao An sneered, "I'll destroy anyone who stands in my way to a better world. No one can stand in my way." "Mom. I'm in pain." "Mom, shut up." Xiao An shouted coldly, "I'm not your mother. Your mother killed me long ago. Stinky man, don't come here. Don't you want this child's life?" Song Haoran shrugged. At this moment, he had already taken a step forward. But Xiao An obviously didn't intend to confront Song Haoran directly. She held Paul and retreated little by little, until finally she turned around and left. Song Haoran didn't chase her. He just looked at Song Ying and said indifferently, "Go and see if anyone is dead under the stairs. We need to figure out some things." Song Ying suddenly looked at Song Haoran and asked abruptly, "Song Haoran, am I dreaming?" "Well, you're not. You're awake like me." Song Haoran looked at Song Ying and took a deep breath. "You're so awake that you can't tell whether you're in a dream or in reality." Song Ying opened her mouth and wanted to say a lot, but she couldn't. She could only murmur, "What's wrong with this world? Paul." My Paul, however, at this moment, before the two of them could check, Xiao An, who had been severely injured by Xiao An, had already climbed up the stairs. She pressed the bleeding wound on her waist with one hand and directly fell on the handrail of the stairs. Paul, seeing this, Song Ying hurriedly rushed forward to support him. You all right?" Paul. Xiao An didn't hear her. She gritted her teeth and supported herself, trying to leave. Song Haoran suddenly said, "Even if you can catch up to her in your current situation, can you deal with that crazy woman just now?" Xiao An had to stop. Song Haoran smiled. "How about cooperation? You tell me what I want to know and I'll help you get the kid back. You saw it, right? It's easy for me to deal with her, how about that?" It seemed that she had no choice. In a room in the medical room of the airport, two guards were having a conversation out of boredom. The one in the room was Han Bingjiang, who had fainted during the interrogation. But at this moment, the two guards suddenly heard a scream from the ward. It was the medical staff, who had just entered the room to check on Han Bingjiang. The two of them rushed into the room and saw a nurse lying on the ground. And on the bed, the unconscious Han Bingjiang was covered with a quilt. What happened? One of the guards checked on the nurse who had fallen to the ground, while the other lifted the quilt on the bed. But after lifting the quilt, all he saw were two pillows lying horizontally on the bed. Damn it! When the guard realized what was going on, he heard the door of the ward slamming shut behind him. The two guards quickly opened the door and rushed out, but there was no one in the corridor. They couldn't help but frown and quickly called through the walkie-talkie. Call. The suspect Han Bingjiang has escaped. Sorry. I can't sit here and wait for death, I must leave this place. Han Bingjiang ran wildly, his heart in a mess. Calm down? Damn it. What time is it? If I stay, how much trouble will I get into in the future? That bitch. Xiao An. She must be the one who framed me. She was the one who knocked me out in the end. But those useless guys said that they couldn't find her. And they didn't see her in the surveillance video? Who are you kidding? How could such a big person disappear and reappear out of thin air? Don't let me escape this time. Xiaoan, I'll make sure you can't survive in this entertainment industry. No. I'll make sure you can't survive in this industry. Absolutely. Perhaps the heavens had heard his prayers, for Han Bingjiang suddenly stopped in his tracks. That was because he could clearly see Xiaoan rushing towards him from the front. And Xiaoan was holding a child in her arms. Bitch, how dare you frame me? Han Bingjiang was furious, and his eyes were wide open. It's you. Go away. Don't block me. The moment she saw Han Bingjiang, Xiaoan's expression changed, and she seemed to have become even crazier. Han Bingjiang, you beast. Scum. Beast. Do you still want to appear in front of me? Without a word, Joanne stabbed at Han Bingjiang with her fork. She even threw Paul, who was still being held hostage, to the ground. Obviously, Han Bingjiang wasn't a well-trained person. He had made a lot of money from the entertainment industry, and his body had been hollowed out by alcohol, women, and wealth. Facing a crazy person, even if it was a woman, he couldn't stop her. He was knocked to the ground by Xiaoan. The fork in Xiaoan's hand was slowly moving towards Han Bingjiang's eyes. He could only grab Xiaoan's wrist with all his might. The two of them were in a deadlock on the ground. Han Bingjiang. You beast. Go to hell. Bitch, you. Han Bingjiang resisted with all his might, but the fork was gradually stabbing at his eyes, which made him more frightened than ever before. And Xiaoan's expression frightened Han Bingjiang even more. She looked like she was going to eat him alive. Who can save me? Han Bingjiang's eyes darted around in fear, hoping that someone could help him, even if it was those stinky policemen. But what he saw next made Han Bingjiang widen his eyes, and he felt crazier than ever. What did he see? The other Xiaoan. The other Xiaoan. She was wearing a red checkered shirt, and she covered her mouth in shock, looking at Han Bingjiang in horror. And there was a young man standing next to Xiaoan. This was obviously the young man with the lost child, Paul, whom Han Bingjiang had met before everything happened. Paul! At this moment, a shrill cry came from the other side. Han Bingjiang turned his head and saw another Xiaoan running to the child who was thrown on the ground. Even though this Xiaoan was wearing a white sweater with a swollen nose and a bruised face, Han Bingjiang still recognized her. And behind the white sweater Xiaoan, Song Haoran and Song Ying were obviously following. Chapter 980. The fear belonged to Han Bingjiang, but the surprise belonged to both Song Haoran and Song Ying. Along the way, the two of them understood what had happened from the white-clothed Xiaoan. The matter of the ring and the different spacetime jump. At first, Song Haoran and Song Ying thought that there were only Xiaoan and Xiaoan in white. But now, there was a third Xiaoan in front of them, and this Xiaoan was with Luo Qiu. Perhaps because Joan in white caught up with them and Joan beside Luo Qiu, Joan in white was distracted. Han Bingjiang, who was extremely nervous, seized the opportunity to remove Joan's hand that was holding the fork and hit Joan's face with his forehead. The attack worked. Han Bingjiang broke free from Joan's grip. However, Xiaoan quickly stood up. This time, she didn't move. She just frowned and looked around. As for Han Bingjiang, he pressed his body against the wall of the passage in fear. He also looked to his left and right, and in front of him. 3 Joans. 3 Joans appeared in front of him. Han Bingjiang's brain could barely process all the information he received in an instant. His face was pale and he felt dizzy. But after rubbing his eyes hard, he still felt dizzy. He muttered to himself, "Crazy? Crazy? Which one are you?" Joan didn't answer Han Bingjiang immediately. She looked at Joan in the checkered shirt beside Luo Qiu and asked in confusion, "Why is there another one?" Joan standing beside Luo Qiu didn't know how to respond. She stood there stupidly. She seemed to be afraid and moved her ankle back slightly. Luocio suddenly looked at Joan and said, "The clothes you are wearing now are actually taken off by her. Do you understand now?" Qiaowen was stunned. She stared at Qiaowen, who was wearing a red checkered shirt, but she tilted her head. Suddenly, Qiaowen shouted angrily, "Impossible! Absolutely impossible! She's dead. Even the gods can't save her." "Nothing is impossible," Luochu said indifferently. "Just like what most people think, it's impossible for all three of you to appear here at the same time. You are not sisters, nor are you twins. You are each an independent individual. You are all recognized by the world in your own time and space. However, all of you are still gathered here." Luochu seemed to know something. Maybe he got it from Joan in the red checkered shirt, or maybe there was another reason. But no matter what the reason was, it seemed to be much clearer than what she knew from Joan in the white shirt. Song Ying looked at Luochu strangely. Even in the face of such an unbelievable thing, he could still be so calm? Song Haoran looked at Luochu with slight surprise. He seemed to be thinking about something. The night before returning to China, Song Haoran had a simple conversation with his dad. From his dad, Song Haoran knew about Mr. Blind's assessment of Luochu. Perhaps all the inconceivable things that happened to him were fated, and it was only natural. Later, on the plane, Song Haoran asked Mr. Blind for advice out of boredom. Mr. Blind pondered for a long time and gave the answer. So his calmness was natural? Song Haoran licked his lips. When he looked at Luochu, his eyes grew more and more interested. Probably feeling Song Haoran's gaze, Luochu looked at him casually. Song Haoran's heart skipped a beat. This once again reminded Song Haoran of the eyes of the giant serpent when he was exploring the Golden Kingdom many years ago. He also remembered the gaze of the golden statue in the temple guarded by the giant serpent. "It's almost time," Luochu suddenly said. "So, do you want to leave or do you want me to do it? Because the three of you exist at the same time, the time and space I am in has begun to become chaotic." Chaotic time and space? Song Haoran had recovered from the memory and the intertwining gaze of Luochu. He seemed to have caught something and asked subconsciously. Luochu looked at Song Haoran and smiled slightly. This was really a bright comet with a will as hard as a rock. He nodded. "Haven't you found it yet? It's nearby." Nearby? Song Haoran was startled. Everyone, including Han Bingjiang and the three Joans, looked around subconsciously at this moment. And the surroundings were indeed strangely quiet at this moment. It was normal to be quiet in the middle of the night, but this was an airport. It was one of the busiest airports in Hua Nation. How could it become so quiet? There was no one. Except for the people involved here, there was no one around. Whether it was the corridor, the nearby shops, or even the open space downstairs of the circular promenade, even the escalators, everything had stopped moving at this moment. It was as if they were the only ones left in the world. Where is everyone? At this time, Song Ying looked around in horror. This feeling of suddenly falling into a deathly stillness really made one's hair stand on end. All disappeared? It's not that people have disappeared. Luochu shook his head. It's just that we temporarily left the normal world. Don't worry, in essence this is still the space-time we are in, but we are in a similar world to a mirror image. Mirror image? Song Haoran repeated again. Reflection, you can think of it that way. Luochu said, "This is the first time I came in contact with this place, so I did a little research at the beginning. I'm a little late, I'm sorry." Something like an alternate dimension? Song Haoran could only respond with what he could understand. You can think of it that way. Luochu said indifferently, "In fact, you don't have to worry too much about this. There are many mysterious disappearances in the world, and there are different names in different places, such as hidden spirits, lost, and so on. They often suddenly disappear in one place, and then suddenly appear in another place, crossing almost unimaginable distances in between. In fact, it is achieved through the mirror image of this spacetime." Song Howren's heart jumped and he suddenly said, "This woman teleported through this mirror image space." As he said that, Song Howren looked directly at Sweater Chiaowen, only to see that Sweater Chiaowen was silent at this time. He did not know what she was thinking, but at least she was quiet. After all, compared to jumping between different space-time, it is more convenient to jump back and forth between the mirror image and reality. Luochio looked at Sweater Chiaowen, and it is more economical, right? You. Sweater Chiaowen looked at Luochio and frowned. You are not from this space-time? How do you know so much about this? Compared to me, you are. No, I am not from another space-time. Luochio said indifferently, I have already said that I am here. This is the first time I have entered the mirror image space, so I could not help but spend more time to study it. That is why I am late. Then what did you find out? Sweater Chiaowen suddenly said, and revealed a cold smile. At this time, Song Ying quickly said, Luochio, be careful, this woman is crazy. She can teleport. I think the ring on Miss Chiao An's hand should not be able to be used anymore. Luochio waved his hand, indicating that Song Ying did not need to worry. Otherwise, she can use the ring's ability to directly leave this mirror image space. As soon as he said that, Chiao An's gaze instantly turned cold and unfriendly. No wonder, no wonder. Han Bingjiang looked at Sweater Chiaowen with fear, and his voice attracted almost everyone. No wonder those guys said that they suddenly could not find you in the video. So this is it. You teleported back and forth between here and reality, avoided the surveillance, and then framed me. You evil woman. Who is more noble than who? Han Bingjiang, in this world, have you never done anything wrong? Sweater Chiaowen sneered disdainfully. Do you dare to say that you have never done anything illegal? It is very common for people like you to do such things. In order to gain attention and fame, you are full of lies and fabrications. Do you think you are a good person? Han Bingjiang's face turned red from the sarcasm, but there were many people here, and he was not as afraid of this crazy woman as he was at the beginning. He immediately sneered. No matter what, I am not as cruel as you, killing people. Ah. Sweater Chiaowen could not help but laugh. I am ending people's lives and you are ending people's lives. Compared to me, do you think your sins are very light? Han Bingjiang, do you know why you are here at this airport today? Han Bingjiang was stunned. Why was he here at this airport? At first, it was because he had received information that the female celebrity Chiaowen had a boyfriend, and wanted to bring him home to meet her parents. His eyes suddenly widened, and he said in disbelief, that anonymous information, was it you who provided it? Is there really a coincidence in this world? Sweater Chiaowen sneered. I remember that if I want to be Chiaowen of this time and space, I naturally have to prepare myself well. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for being too famous. Han Bingjiang. Scum, beast, trash. No matter in which time and space, you are so disgusting. You are just like a stinking bug, you deserve to die. Bitch. I have cut it off. Unexpectedly, Sweater Chiaowen suddenly smiled strangely. In other time and space, I have cut it off. As a man, I have cut it off. I will kill you. Han Bingjiang's eyes were red, and he madly rushed towards Sweater Chiaowen. But at this moment, Sweater Chiaowen's body magically disappeared, leaving Han Bingjiang in the air. His body continued to move forward, but at the same time, Han Bingjiang felt a sharp pain on his back. After disappearing, Sweater Chiaowen appeared again, and directly stabbed the fork in her hand into Han Bingjiang's back. Ah! Han Bingjiang screamed and fell to the ground. Song Howren whistled slightly at this time, and muttered, This woman still has a last resort. What a ruthless character. After falling to the ground, Han Bingjiang painfully turned over, but at this time, Sweater Chiaowen had already stabbed Han Bingjiang's chest with the fork in her hand. Ah! The fork stabbed directly into his chest. Sweater Chiaowen laughed crazily at this moment, holding the fork with both hands, and stabbed Han Bingjiang's chest and abdomen. Blood splashed, splashing on her cheeks and splashing on her lips, that was brighter than any lipstick. Ah, ah! Someone save me! Save me! Save me! I will do anything you want. Save me! Ah! Every time the fork pierced through his body, Han Bingjiang's body would instinctively twitch. At this moment, the pain caused his neck to tighten. His entire head desperately leaned back. His eyes were completely open, as if they were being held up by something. Tears poured out and his hand reached forward. In the midst of his painful cries, his fingers were also trembling. This was a very violent and bloody way to kill. It was so bloody that Xiaoan, who was wearing a red checkered shirt, suddenly covered her mouth and made a retching gesture. She held Luochio's shoulder uncomfortably. What should we do? He will die. Do you want to save him? Luochio suddenly asked. Red shirt Xiaoan's eyes slightly shook. No matter what, it's a human life. Even if this man intends to destroy your life as Xiaoan? Luochio said indifferently. If there's no accident, this man will destroy your current stardom and your life. Of course, there may be some variables, which may prevent him from succeeding in the end. But it can't change the fact that he used this method to gain benefits for himself. Then, in the face of such a person, are you willing to save him? Red shirt Xiaoan opened her mouth slightly, but stopped on second thought. She then looked at Han Bingjiang. She watched as the man struggled less and less under the torture. Eventually, he even stopped struggling. She still didn't say a word. It's a pity that you don't plan to save him, Luochio said indifferently. Even if I want to save him, I can't save him. He can't be saved. Red shirt Xiaoan gritted her teeth. It's impossible to save him. Maybe you're right, Luochio suddenly said at this time. At least if we want to change Han Bingjiang's designated death in this place, the cost is too high. At the same time, Luochio suddenly raised his head, looking at the sky. Faint light, faint sound. The sound of everything seemed to come from all around. When the faint light reflected in everyone's eyes, they all raised their heads subconsciously. In the air, the light blue faint light was gathering. The girl was about 11 or 12 years old, with soft and smooth dark blue long hair. Her figure was light and graceful, and she wore a gorgeous dark blue dress. Her eyes were closed, and her soft blue long hair was slightly scattered in the air. Finally, the young girl slowly opened her eyes. Her eyes were like the sea, showing a deep blue color. Intelligent Manager of All Uses Araya, Serial Number 003. Chapter 981. The blue-haired, blue-eyed girl floating in the air, with such a form and the floating brilliance around her, perhaps could only be done with a super-realistic CG. In reality. But now it was reality. The girl named Araya, who claimed to be 003, slowly landed. Her gentle posture was like a falling feather. After landing, Araya went straight to Luochio. This little girl. Why does she seem to know Luochio? Song Ying was still calm at this time. This was probably the result of the mercenary family's training. After experiencing the zombie incident in the hospital, she learned that the world was not simple, so she was still calm. Song Haoran did not answer. She just watched this scene with full concentration. She did not even blink for fear of missing this scene. Han Bingjiang was already dead, but blood still flowed out of his wounds, and soon a pool of blood formed on the ground. Sweater Joan stood up shakily and stared at Alea. She seemed to be a little scared. As for White Shirt Joan, since she found Paul, she had been holding Paul tightly in her arms like holding a doll. She looked absent-minded. When Araya finally came in front of Luochio, Red Shirt Joan shrunk her neck in fear and instinctively took a few steps back. Only Araya, who was as tall as Luochio's chest, raised her head at this time. So one could see that the blue-haired, blue-eyed girl had no expression on her face. Such a delicate, flawless face. Question: Does the origin authority holder want to intervene in the space-time chaos caused by number 3's appearance? Araya's voice was not angry, and there was no cadence, but it was very pleasant to the ears. Origin authority holder? Luochu blinked and suddenly asked, Me? Question. Does the origin authority holder want to intervene in the space-time chaos caused by number 3's appearance? Araya repeated the question mechanically. What does an origin authority holder represent? Luochu frowned. This seemed to be a good opportunity to understand the truth of the shop behind him. Without a doubt, this mirror world was created by the will of the main world. This girl called herself a manager, so could she represent a part of the will of the main world? Question again. Does the origin authority holder wish to interfere with the space-time chaos caused by the appearance of the Third Lord? Luochu pondered for a moment, then said, If I want to interfere, what do you plan to do? Answer. Administrator number 00 Araya is a sub-administrator. The root authority has the authority to rewrite any program and is higher than the sub-administrator number 003 Araya. The sub-administrator cannot interfere. The blue-clothed, blue-haired, blue-eyed Araya was still speaking emotionlessly. After a moment of silence, Luochu suddenly glanced at the people nearby, especially Song Haoran and Song Ying. Unexpectedly, the girl named Araya suddenly said, "Oh, question. This map has unnecessary interference factors. Would you like to erase it as an administrator? If you erase it, it will be very difficult for me." Luochu shook his head. Understood. Araya nodded slightly, then suddenly said, "Oh, question. As the origin authority holder, why are you being biased?" Question. Unable to understand. Luochu said calmly, "You said that my authority is higher than yours. Then what I want to do should not be restricted by you. In other words, even if I don't explain, it's fine." Affirmative. A manager cannot interfere with the origin authority holder. Araya nodded again and said, "Oh, question. Does the origin authority holder wish to interfere with the space-time chaos caused by the appearance of the Third Lord?" Luochu thought for a moment, amidst the different silence of the crowd. Finally, Luochu slowly said, "If I do not intend to interfere, what will you do?" Answer. Let everything return to normal. Remove the factor that should not exist in the Third Lord's world. At the same time, implant connected memories in everyone present. The cause of death of the deceased human will be changed. Suggested cause of death is a fall from a high altitude, head rupture, immediate death. Araya pointed at Han Bingjiang in front of Luochu. He was already dead. Luochu, however, frowned. Everyone involved? Then, does that include everyone outside the airport? Affirmative. A manager can do it perfectly. Luochu then said, "What do you intend to do with the 3 Jones here?" Araya said, "Answer. Recommend the main plan. Keep the one with the stronger consciousness and restore the original trajectory. The other 2 will be banished to the crevice of spacetime. They may survive, or become food for the void primordial demon." "How do you prove who is stronger?" Luochu asked curiously. Answer. Humans have a strong will to live. Therefore, the one with the strongest will survive. Araya said slowly, suggestion. Carry out the simplest struggle for survival. At this moment, the moment Araya finished speaking, the 3 Jones were suddenly pulled into the air by an invisible pulling force. Red Joan and White Joan screamed at the same time. Even Paul, who was in White Joan's arms, was not spared from being pulled into the air. Qiaowen was the only one who seemed rather calm at this moment. At the same time, a steel plate appeared out of thin air. After the steel plate appeared, it began to multiply crazily. Then, like waves, it rolled in all directions and finally paved a huge steel platform in the air. At this moment, the ground corresponding to this steel platform suddenly disappeared. It was pitch black as far as the eye could see. It turned into an abyss. Explanation. Below is the crevice of the dimension. Falling means failure. the last remaining individual will return to the normal trajectory. In the face of Araya's incredible ability, Song Hauran and Song Ing only felt so small. Both of them were already soaked in sweat, but they could not open their mouths to speak. They did not know when it started, but they could not open their mouth. They could only listen and watch, as if they had become forgotten objects. That's really simple. Luocio also looked at the creation of the platform and the 3 Jones who landed on it. Simple and primitive, but why bring this child up? Explanation: for the same reason. Luocio nodded and glanced at Red Joan whom he had saved. As expected. Then, the main plan you mentioned just now, does that mean there is a backup plan? Confirmation: if the return target cannot be determined before the end of the time limit, the administrator will personally eliminate all individuals and then create a new individual to join the original trajectory. Time? Answer: before the boundary point of the space-time disorder. How long more? Calculation: 293 seconds. Just as Luocio and Araya were asking questions and answering questions, a furious roar came. It was not Joan in the sweatshirt but Joan in the red checkered shirt. Red Joan stood at the edge of the platform, trembling. She looked at Luocio and Araya. What kind of joke is this? How can you decide the life and death of others so casually? What gives you the right? Put me down. Explanation: the administrator has the ability to rewrite the original trajectory of number 03. It is also his duty. Individual request denied. Red-clothed Johann yelled in horror, "Why did I accept this? I am the real one!" She roared madly and pointed at Joan in the sweatshirt and Joan in the black. "They are the fake ones. Why do I have to be with them? This is not fair. Not fair. Put me down. Put me down. I am the real one. Why?" Answer: the individual's request has been denied. Araya said emotionlessly, a reminder, 263 seconds to the end point. Johann glanced at the abyss below the steel platform in horror. Just a glance was enough to make him feel like the endless abyss was going to swallow him up. Qiaoan looked at Luocio unwillingly, begging, "Help me! I beg you! I will do anything you want me to do. Save me! Aren't you an authority holder? Didn't this girl say that as long as you nod, she can't stop you? So, please save me. I am the real one, I am the real one. Trust me. Trust me." Luocio said, "At present, all 3 of you are real, and none of you is fake. The only difference is that you come from different time and space. Since this is the decision of the world's consciousness, I am sorry, but I don't intend to change it. Besides, there is no reason to do so." How Red Joan fell to the ground, as if she had lost her soul and turned into an empty shell. But at that moment, an excited laughter came from behind her. The source of the laughter was Qiaoan, the sweater. Red-coat Qiaoan looked at the crazy red-coat Qiaoan in fear. His body couldn't help but tremble, and he hugged himself tightly with both hands. At this moment, Qiaoan was walking towards Qiaoan step by step with the fork in her hand. His eyes were cold and his smile was cruel. Red Joan chuckled, "You are scared, right? That's right, because I had the same fight as you when I was the manager for the first time. But it doesn't matter, you won't be scared soon. Because you will disappear forever, and I will become you." Have you experienced it? Red-clothed Qiaoan looked up nervously at the demon-like guy who was walking towards him. "Sometimes, yes. Sometimes, no. Sometimes, if you kill them fast enough, they will be allowed to exist by default." Red Joan sneered. "But sometimes those guys are stubborn and can't be killed in a short time, so I will be dragged into this place with them." 003. It seems that there are many so-called Araya. But they are all the same, and the way they solve the problem is the same. So boring. Don't come here, don't come here." Red Joan moved back subconsciously. But soon, her palm touched nothing. Behind her was the dimensional crevice below. Red Joan was so scared that she quickly crawled to the side. There's one thing that Alea was right about. Sweater Johann slowly walked towards Red Coat Johann and sneered. That is, only those who can adapt to the environment and have a stronger will can survive better and deserve to live. You guys are born lucky, so why should you enjoy the happiness you already have? What qualifications do you have? Suddenly, Sweatshirt Xiaoan raised his leg and kicked Red Shirt Xiaoan. He said ferociously, "You don't have the right. Only me. Only I should enjoy more and better things." This kick was so powerful that it caused Xiaoan to roll over. Part of her body had already rolled over the edge of the steel platform. Because of fear, Xiaoan tried to get up in a panic. However, her legs had already slipped off the edge of the platform. She lost her balance in the panic and fell down the edge of the platform. She screamed in horror. Luckily, Red Joan's hands touched the edge of the steel platform at the last moment. She didn't fall down. But unfortunately, she only put herself in more danger. She was almost in a hopeless situation. This is just to make you struggle for a while. Sweater Xiaoan stepped on Red Gown Xiaoan's fingers that were gripping the edge of the platform with ease. She rubbed them slightly and said, "Give up, your life is over." Looking at Red Joan, who was about to lose, and Red Joan, who had the upper hand, Luocio suddenly asked, "My identity as a so-called root authority holder should be given to me by the shop behind me. So, what does this shop mean to you?" Alea's eyes glowed with a faint blue light. The light dispersed and gathered together again, as if it was thinking. Question: Can't understand. Luocio frowned. In this mirrored space, the connection between him and the club seemed to be cut off, but it wasn't very obvious. It was probably like a sponge in the middle of the transmission of electric waves in the air. Even you can't answer it? Luocio shook his head disappointedly. So, even the will of the main world can't answer it. Question: Can't understand. Denial. The will of the world dominates everything. There should be no unexplainable phenomenon. The sub-manager can't represent everything. Although the tone was still emotionless, it gave people the feeling that he was eager to prove something. Luocio just shook his head, then smiled and patted Area's head. "Okay, I won't ask anymore, and I don't mean to doubt the will of the world." Question: Can't understand the meaning, behavior. Luocio just smiled and retracted his hand, then looked up at the steel platform. Area tilted his head. Seeing that Luocio didn't ask any more questions, he also looked at the steel platform. Wei Yi stepped on Red Spectre Xiaoan's finger and laughed sinisterly, but she didn't make Red Spectre Xiaoan give up completely. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared behind Red Joan. Red Joan's body was knocked off the edge of the steel platform. Chapter 982. "Paul, what do you want to eat for dinner?" his mother asked. However, the child who was being asked walked to the window of a shop on the side of the street. He stuck his whole face to the glass and looked at the things inside the window. He was completely attracted by the things inside. It was a very exquisite box. His mother looked up at the name of the shop. It turned out to be a boutique. The box in the window was really exquisite. She couldn't help but look at it. Pa. Do. The child was trying to read the name marked on the pedestal below the box. The name of this decorative box. Pandora. The mother bent down and leaned against the child's back. She smiled and said, "Pandora, Pandora. This is Pandora's box, Paul." Pandora's box? The child named Paul curiously raised his head and saw his mother's chin. His mother said seriously, "Pandora's box is a terrible box, containing countless disasters and misfortunes. Once you open it, not only yourself, but also others will be hurt." The child opened his mouth slightly, then lowered his head to look at the box in the cupboard again. He still lost his initial interest, and the child's curiosity was soon transferred to other places. On the opposite side of the road, a street artist was performing. "Mom, go look at that." The child pointed to the person who was suspended in the air with only a crutch. His eyes suddenly lit up, and he quickly ran over. "Be careful, Paul, don't run across the road." His mother shook her head helplessly. Of course, the reason why she didn't rush over immediately was that she looked at the front and back of the road. There were basically parked cars here. Take the sidewalk. How many times have I told you? You're really a child. Nevertheless, the child had safely walked to the artist, who was suspended and watched with many passers-by. His mother smiled. What a curious child. She planned to go over, but after leaving, she looked back at the box in the window. Pandora's box, so expensive. Fortunately, she glanced at the price below the box and couldn't help but feel lucky that the child didn't ask for it. However, the moment she turned back to look at her child, she froze on the spot. A loud noise came from the front. The child, who had safely crossed the road, was directly pressed to the ground by a huge billboard. Not only the child, but also the performing street artist and several audience members. She opened her mouth slightly and the shopping basket in her hand fell to the ground. She then ran across the road like a madwoman. Before her tears could fall out of her eyes, a car was speeding through the small road. She was sent flying by the impact of her mother's attack. Her last gaze rested on the box in the display window. She didn't have time to feel sorrow or pain. She only subconsciously thought, "What an ominous box." The driver who got out of the car hurriedly ran over. However, when he arrived at the place where the woman he hit and rolled out, the woman mysteriously disappeared. Her body had completely fallen towards the bottom of the steel platform. She was facing the abyss below the steel platform, the so-called dimensional crack, Sweater Joanne. And the one who had been in a trance after hugging Paul was obviously the white-clothed Joanne who had been in a trance. Red-clothed Joanne's hands were still tightly grasping the edge of the steel platform. Although her fingers were badly damaged, she still held on. She couldn't change the fate of being pushed out of the steel platform. She just hurriedly looked back at the white-clothed Joanne who had sneakily attacked her from behind. White-clothed Joanne's face was full of panic, even her hands were trembling, but her push had created an absolute advantage for her. "No one can separate me and Paul. No one can separate me and Paul. No one, no one. You're really the same as me." Sweater Joanne sneered, looking at white-clothed Joanne with a strange look. It seemed to be a look of approval. Finally, Sweater Joanne's body directly fell down. Perhaps one of them had been eliminated, and red-clothed Joanne was in a precarious situation. White-clothed Joanne had basically secured the victory. But at this moment, red-clothed Joanne felt that her body suddenly became much heavier, and her fingers that were grasping the edge of the steel platform were almost broken. Red-clothed Joanne cried out in pain, at the same time looking down in horror. It was Sweater Joanne. She didn't completely fall into the abyss below, but grasped her ankle. Her body was swaying in the air, and each swing brought a great burden to red-clothed Joanne. "Let me go! Let me go!" What terrified Xiao and even more was that Xiao was like a demon that had crawled out of hell. She grabbed Xiao's legs and pulled herself up with all her might. Sweater Joanne grabbed red-clothed Joanne's thigh and waist, climbing up bit by bit. "Let me go! Let me go!" In horror, red-clothed Joanne crazily kicked Sweater Joanne's head with her leg. However, no matter how much strength red-clothed Joanne used, and how badly she kicked red-clothed Joanne's face, she didn't loosen her grip on red-clothed Joanne's leg at all. She kicked out several of Joanne's teeth, and when she opened her mouth, she looked terrified. Red-clothed Joanne's nose was bent, but her eyes were still wide open. She looked like a demon that wanted to take her life. Sweater Joanne's persistence made red-clothed Joanne shudder. "I want to stay until the end. Everything belongs to me." Sweater Joanne roared furiously, grasping red-clothed Joanne's clothes tightly. "Please, let me go." Red-clothed Joanne had to beg. But at this moment, red-clothed Joanne's face slightly changed. This made red-clothed Joanne raise her head subconsciously. A figure was standing in front of her. It was white-clothed Joanne who had fallen down the steel platform together with them. She wouldn't forget white-clothed Joanne's existence, because she was the one who had pushed red-clothed Joanne down the steel platform just now. Now, both red-clothed Joanne and red-clothed Joanne were in an absolute disadvantage. At this moment, if white-clothed Joanne directly pried red-clothed Joanne's hand away from the edge of the platform, both of them would fall into the abyss, and white-clothed Joanne and red-clothed Joanne would become the winner of this struggle for survival. I just want to be with Paul, happily together. White-clothed Joanne opened her eyes slightly, her voice trembling, but her expression was cold. Compared to the crazy red-clothed Joanne, white-clothed Joanne's expression scared red-clothed Joanne more. Don't. Red-clothed Joanne hurriedly said, "You're not that kind of person. You're not like her, you're not. You're not, right?" White-clothed Joanne didn't seem to hear it. She slowly lifted her leg. Both red-clothed Joanne and red-clothed Joanne widened their eyes at the same time, because white-clothed Joanne suddenly stomped down after she lifted her leg. Thud! Her shoe heavily stepped on the edge of the steel platform. At this moment, red-clothed Joanne tightly grasped red-clothed Joanne's hands, but she couldn't catch anything. Red-clothed Joanne instantly disappeared and reappeared in an instant. However, at this moment, red-clothed Joanne had directly fallen into the abyss below. In the rapid fall, red-clothed Joanne stared at the top. At this moment, her eyes collided with red-clothed Joanne's. She saw red-clothed Joanne's face suddenly show a cold smile. "So are you." Red-clothed Joanne suddenly laughed out loud. "So are you. So are you. So are you. Ha 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 ha. So are you. Ha ha ha." At this moment, her wild laughter accompanied her descent and gradually faded into the distance. In the end, the dark abyss completely swallowed her. Only two left. Just now, did the red-clothed Joanne disappear and reappear in an instant? Song Hauran didn't know when he could speak. Maybe he and Song Ing didn't ask anything about the background of Luoqiu and Araya, so they were pardoned. Just now did she? Song Ing was puzzled. Yes. Luoqiu, who was not far away, looked over and said indifferently, "She did appear and disappear for a moment. Generally speaking, it should be the same as Joanne in a sweater you met before. By switching between reality and the mirror image, she achieved the effect of instantaneous movement." Song Hauran was stunned, frowning. "No, she is not the original. I see, I understand." "What do you understand?" Song Ing suddenly raised her head. Song Hauran looked at the steel platform and said slowly, "I'm afraid that the Qiaoan that the outsiders know has already been replaced. Apart from that, I can't explain why the Joanne in the original world also knows the skill of switching between reality and the mirror image. Could it be that when we saw Qiaoan in the guardhouse, she was already?" Song Ing opened her mouth in surprise. But if she switched back and forth, then when she switched back to reality, she should still be in her original position. Her body should be falling down as well. How did she stay in the same place after returning to the mirror image world? Song Hauran said indifferently, "I'm afraid it's an illusion." Just as she was about to switch, she suddenly bent her arm forcefully and forced her body to grow a little taller. When she switched to the mirror image world, her hands were freed and stretched out at the same time. In this way, her arms can reach a longer distance. As he spoke, Song Hauran pointed at the steel platform. "Look carefully. The one in red is not only holding on to the edge of the platform, but she's also holding on to Qiao An's ankle. This is probably the best proof." "She can do that." Song Ing looked at Luoqiu in disbelief. Subconsciously, she felt that Luoqiu was the one who could give the answer. "Something like that." Luoqiu nodded. Araya's eyes fell on Song Hauran and suddenly said, "Oh, excellent individual. Thank you for the compliment." Song Hauran looked at Araya, suppressing the crazy beating of his heart, trying not to lose his composure. But Araya did not continue to observe Song Hauran and said slowly, "Calculation. The remaining time is 105 seconds. That's enough." As if to demonstrate to Araya, Red-clothed Joanne suddenly pulled white-clothed Joanne's ankle and pulled her down from the platform. White-clothed Joanne did not have the crazy and adaptable ability of red-clothed Joanne. She directly fell into the abyss under the steel platform. Paul! While she was falling, she shouted something loudly. She opened her fingers and scratched in the air. The crack of the dimension also swallowed her. 3. 1 left. Finally, after red-clothed Joanne and white-clothed Joanne both fell into the abyss, red-clothed Joanne climbed up the steel platform with difficulty. She directly fell on the platform, gasping for breath. Then, red-clothed Joanne slowly stood up, and then looked down at Araya. She smiled and then said loudly, "I won." So, you already knew about it all along. Yet, you pretended to be innocent. Song Ying took a deep breath. You already knew about it when we were in the guardroom? Red-clothed Joanne smiled casually and then shook her head. No, I didn't know it at that time. It wasn't until you brought the child that I realized what had happened. In this time and space, there was another fellow who had also jumped over. That's what I thought at that time, but I didn't expect that there was not only one, but two. You fooled all of us. Song Ying smiled bitterly. In my original time and space, I was an actress. Red-clothed Joanne sneered. I was an even better actress than Joanne in this time and space. Should I say that my acting skills are too good? Or are you too stupid? Damn it. What an annoying face. Song Ying gritted her teeth. Luochio looked at red-clothed Joanne and suddenly asked, "Can you tell me one thing? When I found you, you didn't have the ring on your body. How did you change yourself freely?" Ring. Red-clothed Joanne smiled, and then tore off the button of her shirt, revealing half of her chest. Is it really good to wear such a precious thing? I sewed it inside long ago. She put her finger on the soft part of her chest. I see. Luochio nodded. If it was a woman's private part, he would not take the initiative to check it. But, thank you so much. Red-clothed Joanne smiled. It was so dangerous. I thought I would be eliminated by that crazy guy at the beginning. I really thought I was going to die. Thank you so much for saving me and letting me recover so well. Otherwise, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to hold on until now. You're also good-looking. When I go back, can you be my boyfriend? How about that? I'm good at serving people. Disgusting. Song Ying couldn't help cursing in a low voice, and then quickly looked at Luochio, as if she was afraid that he would agree. However, Luochio suddenly frowned. No one knew what he was thinking. I've already won. Why aren't you putting me down? Red-clothed Joanne shouted again. I've also participated in other survival fights in other spaces. I know the rules. Put me down and leave this damn place. You emotionless thing. Refused. The survival fight is not over yet, the unstable factors still exist. Reminder. Time remaining, 60 seconds. Araya's voice was still emotionless. Are you kidding me? They've all fallen down. I'm the only one left. Suddenly, red-clothed Joanne seemed to have thought of something, and immediately looked at a place on the platform. There, Paul was standing blankly with a pale face, and didn't know what to do. Seeing red-clothed Joanne looking at him, he even subconsciously shrank his body. Red-clothed Joanne opened her eyes wide, and her expression changed greatly. Could it be? I think you're mistaken about one thing, Miss Joanne of an unknown space. Luochio said indifferently, the reason why I saved you is not that you need to live, but to give a chance to the little life that's being born in your body. What do you mean? Song Ying was stunned. Luochio sighed. She's pregnant. Yin. Chapter 983. She is a pregnant woman? Song Ying covered her mouth in surprise, and Song Hauran frowned. Most of the time, people's attitude towards pregnant women was subtle. This woman might be evil, and this woman might be hated by everyone, but when this woman had a little life in her body, her situation would be a little different. She might not be forgiven, but the little life in her body was innocent. A pure and spotless life would always be loved by others. Our respect for pregnant women was because of her greatness in giving birth to life. This is too cruel. Song Ying's face was pale. There was only 7 or 8 years old Paul on the stage, and the little life in red dress Xiao An's belly. Only one of them was allowed to live. For a moment, when Song Ying looked at Araya again, this blue-haired, blue-eyed girl no longer made her feel delicate and cute, but inexplicably scared. Because all this was done under her will, she was the one who set up such a cruel struggle for survival, and she was the one who created this cruel situation with her own hand. Red-dressed Xiaoan, who was on the steel platform, stood there blankly as if she was struck by lightning. She lowered her head and stroked her abdomen. Her hair covered her face, and her sadness, joy, and disgust couldn't be seen. Only her slightly trembling shoulders were so clear. It can't be like this. It can't be like this. Song Ying suddenly looked agitated, quickly walked to Luoqiu and grabbed his arm. This is unreasonable, this is unreasonable. Think of a way. Think of a way. I have already said that I won't interfere with Araya's work. Luoqiu shook his head. Since I have said so, we can only wait for the result. But this is too strange. It's too strange. Song Ying grabbed Luoqiu's arm with both hands. It's too unreasonable. Why must there be such a choice? Paul is just a child. What's wrong with him surviving? There are so many people in the world, so many billions of people, can't even accommodate such a small life? Luoqiu was silent for a moment. Song Ying was so anxious that she was a little scared. She said in a trembling voice, "Quick, think of something." "Time, there's no time." Araya had already said that there were only 60 seconds left, and at this moment, time was quickly passing by. Perhaps there was less than half of the time left, or perhaps even less. "Conservation," Luoqiu finally said. "What?" Song Ying was stunned. Song Haoran, who was behind her, was also stunned. "It's probably similar to the conservation of mass," Luoqiu sighed and said. "Physically, everything on Earth conforms to the conservation of energy. Liquids, solids, and gases were interchangeable. Humans should be in this cycle. Souls. If souls had weight, they should also be included in the cycle of conservation. Since they were all conservationists, even if there was only a slight increase in any one of them, everything would become chaotic, and the current balance would no longer be maintained. Even at this stage." Speaking of this, Luoqiu suddenly stopped and glanced at Araya. The girl was just paying attention to the changes on the steel platform. At the same time, she slowly stretched out her arm. Luoqiu knew that time was approaching the limit. The steel plates on the spread steel platform began to crack and fall off, falling into the abyss below, which meant that the space left for Joan and Paul was rapidly shrinking. The huge steel plates fell from mid-air and sank into the abyss in an instant without any sound, but it was this silence that made people feel scared. Time seemed to stop at this moment. When the space left for Joan and Paul to move was very small, the peeling steel plates were approaching Joan's feet. She glanced down, and then suddenly walked towards Paul. Behind her, the steel plates were still peeling off piece by piece. Finally, when she came in front of Paul, there were only 9 steel plates left, showing a 9-square grid. She and Paul stood in the middle of the steel plate at the same time. "Paul, are you?" Joan suddenly asked, and reached out to touch Paul's cheek. "Mommy?" Paul looked at Xiaoan timidly. She suddenly asked in a low voice, "Do you know who changed your name?" Paul shook his head blankly. "I don't know." Joan squatted down slowly and looked at Paul's face from bottom to top. Her voice became gentle. "I have a child in my belly. I'm about to give birth to a child. Although Paul doesn't know who gave you your name, the baby in my body doesn't have a name yet. Paul, do you know?" Joan's hand slowly fell down, grasping Paul's wrist. "Mom." Paul was frightened. "I'm scared." Because at this moment, the remaining 9 steel plates had once again peeled off 4 of the 4 corners. The remaining 5 plates were in the shape of a cross. "Paul, good boy, don't be scared." Joan's voice became softer, By the way, Paul, have you seen your father? When Paul heard the word father, he covered his ears. He seemed to be very afraid of hearing this name. Joan slightly opened her mouth, but soon she stood up and hugged Paul tightly. Don't be scared, don't be scared. Come on, listen, can the baby in my belly hear anything? At this moment, the steel plates peeled off again. 4 of the remaining 5 steel plates peeled off at this moment, leaving Joan and Paul standing on one of the steel plates. Araya reached out her other hand, which meant that the time she gave was up, but the result was not out yet. She would carry out the backup plan, which was to erase these unstable factors, and then create a new one, putting it into the original time and space track. Target locked. Erase program started. At the center of Araya's palms, faint light began to gather. They soon turned into blue and white light balls. Within the 2 balls of light, Song Hauran felt despair. He could feel that the 2 balls of light contained an enormous amount of power. Can you wait a moment? At this moment, Luocio suddenly put his hand on Araya's wrist and looked at Araya. Araya tilted her head and looked at Luocio confusedly. Request? Order? If it's a request, will you refuse? Luocio stared into Araya's eyes. The blue light in her eyes started to spread out and then gathered quickly. Araya directly said, yes. The time limit has reached and the erase must be carried out. Luocio pondered for a moment. During this moment, Araya ignored him. The 2 light balls were about to shoot out. Luocio then said, order. The light balls in Araya's palms suddenly froze. Accept. Child Administrator Araya, Serial 003, temporarily suspended the erase program. The program has been suspended. After saying that, Araya slowly put down his hands and looked at Luocio. Report. The time limit has reached. The unstable factor will affect this spacetime. Currently calculating. Actually, there is still time left, right? Luocio looked at Araya. Since 2 people have been eliminated in a row, it means that the original burden has been reduced by a lot. In this case, it can delay the time. Araya's eyes kept flashing. He even closed his eyes directly. After a few seconds, he said, was starting to adjust the time limit, adjusting. Araya fell into silence. Seeing this, Song Ying could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. When she looked at Luocio, she showed a relieved smile. I was right about you. No. Luocio shook his head. I just wanted to test if the so-called root authority can really order Araya. When the time limit is up, if there is still no result, the original ending will just be delayed a little. Anyway, Song Ying gritted her teeth. You still helped, didn't you? At least that proves that you are not the same as her. Do you know that the feeling you gave me just now is the same as the feeling Araya gave me? Luocio did not say anything. He just turned and looked at Joan and Paul on the last steel plate silently. He suddenly asked, do you think her gentleness now is real or fake? Song Ying opened her mouth and looked at him subconsciously. At this moment, Joan's face was full of gentleness. Her lips were rippling with a kind of motherly instinct. She was like a mother who was breastfeeding her child. Real or fake, no one could tell. She said that she was an actress herself. What did you hear? There was only 1 steel plate left, but there was no fear on Joan's face. Her gaze was so gentle that it seemed to be contagious. Paul's emotions gradually calmed down. Paul raised his head and looked at Joan in confusion. Mom, I can't hear anything. You really can't hear me? Paul shook his head slowly. Qiaoan gently caressed her abdomen and lowered her eyes. But I can hear the child in my belly calling me mommy, mommy. Do you know that the child often talks to me? Paul opened his eyes as if he found it hard to believe. Qiaoan patted Paul's head. Do you want to know what this child said to me? Paul nodded. Qiaoan's voice became clearer. He told me, Mom, I want to come out as soon as possible. I want to see Mom. That's what he told me. So. Qiaoan smiled as she held Paul's armpit and lifted him up. So, if Mom wants this kid to come out and meet you, but you need Paul's help, will Paul help Mom? Yes. Paul nodded heavily. Qiaowen said softly, "You're such a good child. Mommy will always love you. Always, always." She lifted Paul and reached out her hands to the only steel plate. Always, 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 always. Red-dressed Qiaowen was about to let go of her hand. Once she did, Paul would fall into the abyss below, into the crevice of the dimension. No. Finally, Song Ying screamed in horror from below. Her voice was penetrating. In this empty and quiet mirror world, her voice was clearly transmitted to Joan and Paul's ears. But Joan didn't care. She just looked at Paul with a smile. "Paul, do you know? Mother really wants to be your mother. I really, really want to give birth to you personally. But if Paul is here, Mom can't give birth to him." "Mom, don't you want Paul?" Paul asked with fear. "I will." Red-clothed Johann suddenly said, "I will take Paul. The child I gave birth to will be called Paul." Qiaowen loosened his hands in an instant. Paul directly fell into the abyss from the only steel platform. At this moment, Qiaowen's eyes were cold. She looked at the falling Paul without any expression on her face. She said indifferently, "I'm not your mother. But there's one thing you should be thankful for, that is, you've seen your father, even though it's only in this space and time." "Mom!" The voice and the small figure quickly disappeared into the dark abyss. Only red-clothed Qiaowen was left on the steel plate. Song Ying's hands, which were tightly grasping Luoqiu's arms, dropped down powerlessly at this moment. She looked at Joan standing on the steel platform, her eyes gradually turned cold, as if she was looking at a dead body, a lifeless object. "Why is it like this?" Song Ying felt a little cold, subconsciously hugging her own body. She looked at Luoqiu blankly, only to find that Luoqiu didn't move at all, not even blinking his eyes. She looked at Song Hauran, only to find that his face, which was always smiling, was now a little gloomy. "I've already won!" Qiaowen suddenly yelled, "Alea! I've really won this time!" Time limit corrected. Time limit reached. Araya, who paused, finally opened her eyes. Her blue eyes glowed again, and she looked at Luoqiu. A question. "Do you want to continue pausing the purging process?" Question. "Do you want to continue pausing the purging process?" Luoqiu looked at Joan silently. After Araya asked for the third time, he finally said, "Even though there are countless dazzling pearls in the sea, there are times when they can't break out of their shells. Sometimes they can't even take shape. Do as you like, Araya, I don't care anymore." "Understood." Araya nodded. "Permission has been obtained. Continue the purging process. Use the backup plan to start, Joan will create again." Araya opened her hands. A ball of light was born from her hands and slowly floated out. In the air, the ball of light slowly elongated, changed shape, and finally turned into a human figure. When the light faded away from the human figure, what appeared in front of everyone was another Joan. However, this Joan was gray-white, as if she was made of clay. Based on Araya's words, this Joan wasn't from this time and space. She was a Joan who was created again. Memory, create again. Araya nodded at the forehead of the new Joan. Fusion started. Implantation of virtual soul. Implantation successful. Fusion in progress. Estimated fusion time, 400 seconds. Waiting. Seeing that the skin color of the recreated Qiaowen was slowly returning to normal, just like a person who was really asleep, Qiaowen screamed in horror. "What are you doing? What are you doing?" Joan screamed crazily, "I've won! I've won! I'm the one who's left. I'm qualified to replace the Joan of this time and space. I'm the winner! Araya! Araya! Are you going to break your promise? Let me go! Let me go!" Rejected. The victory condition hasn't been met. The unstable factor still exists. Clear the program and start again. At this moment, Alea slowly raised her palm. The ball of light with terrifying power once again emerged from her palm. "What do you mean the victory condition hasn't been met? I'm the only one left?" Joan looked at Araya in panic. Are you blind? Even Paul was thrown down by me. How can there still be unstable factor here? But Araya didn't say anything this time. This made Joan even more hysterical. Liar? You're all liars. You're just using me for fun. You're all liars. You didn't plan to let any of us go. You wanted us all to die. You took everything from me. Liars. Demons. Idiot. Suddenly, Song Howren's voice was heard. This made Joan even more agitated. Song Howren sneered. You're quite smart. Why can't you understand such a simple thing? You're the only one left on the stage. Where's the other one? Did you really win? There's another one. There's another one? Joan opened her eyes wide and turned around. However, this piece of steel plate was only 1 square meter in size. Who would be able to hide in it? Qiaoan kept turning his body, but all he could see was air. You lied to me. There's no one here. Who said there's no one? Song Howren squinted his eyes and sneered. He's in your body. He's the child you're carrying. Joan looked like she was struck by lightning. Don't you understand? Song Howren glanced at Araya and said, she said the winner could replace the original Joan in our time and space. But she didn't mention the child. I'm afraid the child in your belly was conceived in another time and space, right? So for this time and space, the child itself is the biggest unstable factor. As long as you carry the child, you can't win. You're just wasting your time. Impossible. No. It can't be true. I don't believe it, I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Joan pressed her head with both hands. You're lying to me. You're all lying to me. Song Howren was a member of Jianghu and had his own set of principles. At this moment, he looked at Qiaoan and sneered. Heaven's sins can be forgiven, but self-inflicted sins cannot be forgiven. I don't want. Joan suddenly screamed. At this moment, she suddenly raised her hand. In her hand, there was a fork used for Western food. The fork should have been Sweater Qiaoan's. Since when did Red Coat Qiaoan have it? Doubt flashed through Song Howren's mind. Did Qiaoan accidentally fall when she pushed Qiaoan off the platform? But Song Howren didn't have time to think about it. Because at this moment, Qiaoan had suddenly stabbed the fork into his own abdomen. Start. The light ball in Araya's hand flew to Joan at a high speed. The ball of light suddenly shone brightly, as dazzling as the sun. In the white light, Joan let out a shrill cry. When the light ball approached her, she raised her trembling hands, as if she was holding something in her hands, a bloody life. I won, in the end. The blazing white light swallowed everything. All sight, all feeling. When the light gradually dissipated, the steel plate could no longer be seen in the air. Naturally, red-clothed Johann could no longer be seen either. But it didn't mean the end, because the recreated Joan didn't open her eyes. Are people really that scary? Song Ying looked at Song Howren blankly. In the end, did she give? Song Howren didn't say anything. At least, he has been here. Although he didn't open his eyes and didn't see the mother who gave birth to him, he has indeed been here. It was Luoqiu's voice. When Song Ying looked back, Luoqiu walked forward, and then jumped into the dark abyss without warning. Wait for me here.